Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 3141, The Bait. When Yan and Natalie saw the true face of the so-called stage ruler, they frowned. It was unsettling. There must be some sort of reason as to why these black monkeys brought them to their stage ruler. It was not for the first time that the chief flag monkey had encountered the stage ruler. He knew that the dark nether bugs were a kind of food that the stage ruler would not refuse, but it was a well-known fact that the dark nether bugs were very difficult to capture. The candles that were used to capture dark nether bugs by the insect master race, or any other race for that matter, were all supplied by the royal monkeys. He had been doing this for so many years, in order to make use of this stage ruler in case of a tricky situation. Stage ruler, I have worked hard to collect these dark nether bugs. Please accept them, the chief flag monkey said, bowing deeply. Well, tell me, what's your purpose? And why did you bring two souls of light? The stage ruler's eyes fell on Natalie and Yan. As a purified being, he could instantly perceive that the two girls came from the light region. Glancing indifferently at the two girls, the chief flag monkey answered, these two are also an offering from the royal monkey race. The stage ruler sneered, you want me to devour the souls of light? Well, it's better than nothing. When he finished speaking, he stuck his tongue out towards Yan and Natalie. The two girls shut their eyes tight, awaiting their deaths. They knew they were no match for such a powerful being. Just as the stage ruler was about to devour the two girls, the chief flag monkey suddenly cried out, please wait. What? A dangerous light flashed in the stage ruler's eyes. It peeved him whenever anyone stopped him from eating his food. The only thing keeping this insolent monkey alive was the fact that he had offered him dark nether bugs for many times in the past. I offer these two souls of light to you, not for you to eat, the chief flag monkey explained carefully. Looking at the monkey in confusion, the stage ruler asked, then, what do you want to do? These two are just bait. They will lure another purified being who is lurking around the dark region. I believe that you will be more interested in this purified being, the chief flag monkey continued. Another purified being. Since he was one himself, the stage ruler of course knew the rules of purified beings very well. Once he became a purified being, he was bound to this stage of the other shore. There shouldn't have been another purified being in stage 14 of the other shore. You know the price you would have to pay if you're lying to me, the stage ruler said, curling up the tongue in his mouth. The killing intent in his eyes was like a solid mist thickening. As the commander of the royal monkey race, the chief flag monkey knew that he had to keep calm. Confidently, he answered, I dare not lie to you. That purified being came from stage 13 of the other shore. We don't know how she entered the desire world. But just a few days ago, that purified being used the great Sanskrit light to erode everything within a radius of 100 miles. The stage ruler fixed his eyes on the chief flag monkey and looked somewhat curious when he saw the monkey seemed quite sure of what he had said. At the same time, he said slowly, you are so foxy. You can't contend with that purified being, so you want me to fight for you, right? Although the stage ruler seldom went outside, he was not stupid after all. Obviously, the royal monkeys wanted to make use of his strength to kill that purified being. Unflinchingly, the chief flag monkey answered calmly, I thought you would be interested in another purified being, and, it is true, we are not strong enough to defeat her. With eyes narrowing slightly, he continued, stage ruler, if you are unwilling to face that purified being, I will take these two souls of light away. The chief flag monkey was, however, very certain that the stage ruler wouldn't turn away from this opportunity. You've already brought them here, so just let them stay, the stage ruler said hastily. The chief flag monkey could not help but internally sneer at the stage ruler. He was acting the exact way he had expected him to. Turning to his followers, the chief flag monkey barked, send the two human souls of light here under escort. And seal them here. After putting down the dark nether bugs, several royal monkeys stepped forward and escorted Yan and Natalie down. Another royal monkey drew a trap array on the ground. Then Yan and Natalie were pushed into the trap array by the royal monkeys. Stage ruler, please enjoy the food. The chief flag monkey bowed with a courteous smile on his face. Then, he hurriedly led the other royal monkeys away. The chief flag monkey didn't care which purified being would win and which would lose. He was only afraid that when the two purified beings fought, the heaven and earth would be destroyed as a result, so he didn't want to stay here to find out. Sitting inside the trap array, Yan and Natalie exchanged silent glances. Judging from the royal monkey's words, they were nothing but disposable bait to lure another purified being here. Who on earth is that purified being? Natalie asked in a low voice. Yan shook her head, also at a loss. It had been kept a secret that Elvinia was a purified being. The warriors from the Pear Hill had no idea about this, which was why Yan and Natalie were so confused. Besides, it never crossed Yan's mind that Elvinia would enter the dark region to rescue her. Will it be your elder brother? Natalie suddenly asked, eyes flashing excitedly. Yan thought for a moment. It wouldn't be a surprise, in a sense, since Zen was always going on adventures and things always seemed to happen to him. Moreover, it made sense that if Yan was kidnapped, Zen wouldn't hesitate to rescue her. No way, Yan whispered. Even though she was in grave danger, she didn't want her brother to get into trouble in the dark region because of her. Swish! Suddenly, the stage ruler's long tongue shot out like lightning and curled around a dark nether bug that lay next to the two girls. In the blink of an eye, the stage ruler had sucked it into his mouth. After chewing it thoughtfully, he swallowed it and smiled in satisfaction. Both Natalie and Yan watched in horror, but there was nothing they could do since they were trapped in the array. In a matter of seconds, the stage ruler devoured all the dark nether bugs. Seeing he had eaten all the food, he sat down on the side of the swamp, eyeing the two girls curiously. The darkness fruits in your bodies could only last for around 6 hours. Then, he smiled mischievously. It seems the monkeys were under the impression that the other purified being would come by then. I don't know about that, Natalie replied coldly. The stage ruler just smiled. No longer asking any other question, he waited patiently by the side of the swamp. 3 hours passed by. The stage ruler's eyes rolled around in a bored fashion, then suddenly, he sat up vigilantly. Looking towards the distance, he let a smile creep on his face. Without any warning, he opened his mouth and his tongue shot out into the darkness. Yan and Natalie craned their necks to turn around to look at where the stage ruler was sticking out his tongue, but they couldn't see anything. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The tongue stuck out then retracted, and once again stuck out, retracted. This went on for a while. However, it was fruitless. On the contrary, bloodstains appeared on his tongue, which had obviously been cut by a sharp weapon. Yan and Natalie exchanged confused glances. They wondered who the stage ruler was fighting with. The newcomer seemed so powerful that even the ruler of a stage of the other shore couldn't seem to do anything about it, and was instead wounded. Chapter 3142, Confrontation. The stage ruler's several attacks failed. What was worse, his tongue was injured by the two people in the distance. His head that had been bobbing on the surface of the black marsh till just now suddenly rose as he climbed out of the marsh. Only then did Yan and Natalie realize how big this stage ruler actually was. Those monkeys were right, they do have some skills. The stage ruler cocked his head to the side to look at the two trembling girls. They're trying to save you, aren't they? Yan tried to say something, but she was too struck with fear. Stretching out his huge claw, the stage ruler tried to reach for Yan and Natalie. The two thought that the stage ruler was going to kill them, so they shut their eyes tight. However, much to their surprise and relief, the claw grabbed the trap array and the soil under their feet. Carefully, the stage ruler tossed them onto his back. He doesn't plan to kill us. Natalie cried incredulously. Yan's eyes were trained on the two mysterious figures. He's not interested in us. He's interested in the ones flying over there. The two figures in the distance had suddenly launched themselves into the air, flying towards them at an incredible speed. Yan squinted. She couldn't tell who the other one was, but she recognized the woman. She was Elvinia from the Oneness Sky Palace. Yan and Natalie had seen her before in the Chaotic Source world. Back then, Elvinia didn't perform well in the Chaotic Source world. Yet now she was able to have a physical body on the other shore, and even her appearance could be seen clearly. Is she the purified being? Natalie blurted out. I suppose so, but who is the other person? Yan pondered. Back in the Chaotic Source world, Elvinia had been following her brother the whole time. It was very likely her companion was no other than Zen. Narrowing her eyes at the indistinct figure, Yan realized the shape and movement were familiar. Zen, she said softly. Ha ha ha, As the two figures in the distance steadily approached, the stage ruler crawled on the ground, cracking his mouth wide open and laughing maniacally. The laughter echoed in the black marsh like dull thunder. The poisonous creatures that lurked in the black marsh panicked and fled everywhere. When Zen saw the huge monster in the distance, he frowned slightly. It turned out that the purified being of stage 14 was actually a huge lizard. Upon seeing the huge lizard, Zen scanned the area. Finally, his gaze landed on the two faint human figures on his back. Even if he was far away, Zen was sure that they were two souls of light. Yan, he thought to himself. A trace of anger welled up inside him, and he sped up. Elvinia, who had been flying next to him, felt his change in behavior. Obviously, Zen was worried about his sister most. Elvinia raised her eyebrow, deep in thought. In a matter of seconds, the two of them finally landed in front of the giant lizard. Ha ha, the stage ruler's muffled laughter finally ceased once the two landed in front of him. Stretching out a long, scaly claw to point at Elvinia, he hissed, "Are you the purified being the monkeys mentioned?" Elvinia looked at the stage ruler coldly but said nothing. Although the stage ruler's appearance was different from hers, she could still feel a sense of familiarity from him. This familiar feeling indicated to her that the stage ruler was the same as her. Elvinia frowned deeply. How could such an ugly thing be her own kind? Answer me. The originally calm stage ruler suddenly became irritable. He was the ruler of stage 14. The creatures from the dark region and the light region didn't dare to ignore him. But Elvinia was completely indifferent to him. Zen, who stood in front of Elvinia, pointed at the back of the stage ruler. The black monkeys are using my sister as bait. If you don't want to be mindlessly manipulated by the black monkeys, please just let them go. The moment Zen spoke, Yan gasped softly. Natalie was also pleasantly surprised. It was really Zen. The stage ruler's eyes swept over Zen's figure. Elvinia was a purified being, but Zen was not. However, this was the man who had hurt his tongue, which puzzled him. The black monkeys want to use me to kill your sister, the stage ruler echoed. Yes, Zen nodded. Please don't be fooled by those monkeys. Those ugly monkeys can't fool me. Pointing his claw at Elvinia, the stage ruler smiled. I will release the two souls of light if you give her to me. What do you think? When Elvinia heard this, she sneered. Zen, on the other hand, remained calm. What if I don't agree? Then all of you will have to stay. The stage ruler opened his big mouth and made a muffled, guttural sound. Now, he was interested in not only Elvinia, but also Zen. The scales on his huge body suddenly spread out, and thousands of colors blossomed from the edges of the scales. The lights that the lizard released were not just in white, but in many other colors. The originally dark and lifeless swamp suddenly came to life, illuminated in colors. It was like the first breeze in spring, gently nudging the sleeping nature to an awakened state. The lights couldn't hurt Yan, Natalie, Zen, and Elvinia, but they were fatal to the other creatures in the swamp. Everything that came into contact with the lights all turned into nothingness. What was even more terrifying was that all the creatures in the marsh seemed to be drawn towards the colorful lights. Snakes that were more than 10,000 feet long, crocodiles lying in the depths of the marsh, bugs in the shadows. All the creatures rushed towards the lights for some reason, only to be gruesomely annihilated. Then, it dawned on Zen. The creatures were actually sacrificing themselves. The stage ruler is really powerful, Zen muttered, tightening his grip on the javelin he was holding. Not long after Elvinia became a purified being, her strength far surpassed that of any ordinary creature on the other shore. Even the creatures in the dark region were no match for her. The stage ruler in front of him was an ancient monster that had lived for countless years. His understanding of himself, the other shore, and the great Sanskrit light was not something that Elvinia could compare with. The stage ruler threw his head back, unleashing a thunderous roar. Then, his sharp claw swung out to try to reach for Zen's head. Zen saw this coming. Reflexively, he flew to the side like a ghost. Boom! After the claw smashed into the marsh, ripples quivered across its surface and spread out in all directions. Zen leapt high into the air to dodge the stage ruler's blow. A sharp light flashed in his eyes, and he threw the javelin in his hand, aiming at the spot in between the stage ruler's eyes. Chapter 3143, Cycle. The javelin whistled through the air. Whoosh! The stage ruler was caught off guard, and the javelin sank into his forehead. Zen had thrown the javelin with a lot of force. If it had managed to pierce the stage ruler's skull, it would have shattered his head. However, this was not the case. Such a powerful strike even failed to pierce through his skin. Only the tip of the javelin had hit him. Swish! Even though his forehead had been struck, the stage ruler fiercely swiped at Zen, who was still floating in the air with a claw. Zen didn't have the time to dodge. Bang! Zen was smashed into the marsh, ripples waving from where he had landed. Elvinia's face fell as she saw what happened. Before she could take a step towards Zen, the stage ruler's other claw was reaching for her. I've stayed on stage 14 for a long time, the stage ruler's voice boomed. I've tasted almost all the creatures here, but the most delicious is still the dark nether bugs. But, I think you will taste just as good. Whoosh! The huge claw encircled Elvinia in the blink of an eye. However, she was quick on her feet. Immediately, she somersaulted backwards, narrowly avoiding his clutches. Whoosh! Whoosh! The stage ruler's sharp claw kept swiping towards Elvinia. She continued to move nimbly on the black marsh, dodging the claw like a dragonfly skimming on the surface of a pond. Actually, it had been extremely dangerous while she was retreating to evade his attacks. After she had become a purified being, she had made great progress relying on this physical body. Back when she was on stage 13, she could easily unleash a power of more than 3,000 divine megatons, which surpassed even Zen's strength. Now that she had entered stage 14, her physical body was definitely not considered weak, but her opponent was the ruler of stage 14 who had numerous years of experience. The difference in strength was painfully obvious. Swish, whoosh, phew. As she retreated, her body kept transforming into different shapes to evade the claw which was only inches away from her. Let me see how long you can keep this up. The eyes of the stage ruler revealed a trace of excitement. As the ruler of stage 14, he had been standing at the top of this stage for too long. In the entire stage 14, there seemed to be nothing worth his attention. Now that he finally met someone powerful enough, naturally, he felt somewhat of a thrill. As he rushed forward, he reached out his two claws. As the two claws intersected, colorful lights pierced through the darkness. Elvinia clenched her teeth and continued to dart from left to right in the shadows. Puff! A sharp claw swiped at her chest, slicing through her flesh. A deep gash appeared under her clavicle, a wound so deep that one could see her bones. Elvinia winced and was about to leap to the other side, but the stage ruler had already guessed her next move and yanked at her before she could even try. I'm done for. Her heart sank. She suddenly realized that her journey on the other shore would come to an end. Yet somehow, even in the face of death, she felt no regret. Ever since she entered stage 13, until now, she had gotten to know herself better. But if she died, then, Zen. Before she could even finish the thought, she realized the sharp claw that was reaching for her abruptly stopped a few inches from her face. Elvinia blinked confusedly, it was as though time had stopped. Not only did the stage ruler's claw not move forward, it actually seemed to be slowly moving backward. Turning to look at the stage ruler's face, Elvinia was surprised to see an intensely angry expression. As the massive claw retreated inch by inch, the stage ruler let out a deep roar. Only then did Elvinia notice that Zen was holding the tail of the stage ruler tightly, dragging the huge lizard backwards. Dang human! The stage ruler roared and gave up chasing Elvinia. Turning around furiously, he pounced on Zen. Boom! As the mud splashed, Zen was thrown under the stage ruler. Zen! Zen! Yan screamed from the back of the big lizard, but she could do nothing as she was still trapped inside the array. As Elvinia watched this scene, she gradually regained her senses. This whole time, she had been evading the stage ruler, however, upon seeing Zen in trouble, she was enraged. Planting her foot into the mud, she suddenly launched herself into the air, rushing towards the huge lizard. But before she could even get close, the stage ruler's tail swept an arc in the air. Bang! The stage ruler's tail alone was enough to land a blow with 4,000 divine megatons of force. Elvinia collided right into the tail, and was smashed into the ground. Letting out a muffled groan, she tasted a fishy, bittersweet taste well up from her throat. Dazed, she lay in the ground motionless for a moment. Ignoring Elvinia, the stage ruler focused his attacks on Zen. Under such a situation, Zen had almost no room to retreat. He could only lie on the ground and try to resist with his arms. Boom! After the stage ruler landed a blow, the light spots within Zen's body became extremely active, helping Zen absorb the power of the blow. But the power of the stage ruler was too strong. While the chaotic source spirits bore the power, they started showing faint signs of fatigue. Buzz! At the same time, the golden light in Zen's body also glowed. It was the truth of godly way washing over him, restoring the energy of the chaotic source spirits. The stage ruler's huge eyes flashed with a strange light. He had never left stage 14, so he naturally had never seen anything like the chaotic source spirits. He had been under the impression that Zen's body was just extraordinarily tough. But no matter how tough one thing was, there had to be a limit. Determined, the stage ruler launched another strike at Zen. Boom! The chaotic source spirits, which had just been washed by the truth of godly way, once again were on the verge of falling into the state of fatigue. However, while Zen was momentarily suffering from the attack, the truth of godly way quickly restored the chaotic source spirits. After being attacked by the stage ruler twice in a row, not only was Zen completely unharmed, the chaotic source spirits were still full of vitality. A sly smile crept on his face. Recently, when Zen was testing the chaotic source spirits within his body, he had come up with a theory. When the chaotic source spirit's power reached a certain level, the truth of godly way of his body and the chaotic source spirits could operate in a cycle, which could greatly slow down the speed of the chaotic source spirits getting exhausted. As a result, the attack that the chaotic source spirits inside Zen's body could withstand was 10 to 20 times more powerful than what others could bear. What if the chaotic source spirits continued to grow in power? The truth of godly way used the attacks Zen suffered to fuel the chaotic source spirits. As long as Zen wasn't killed in one blow, his physical body would be practically indestructible. What was happening right now was proving his theory correct. The power of the stage ruler was indeed very strong, but he was unable to destroy the chaotic source spirits all at once, which meant that the chaotic source spirits would never fall into exhaustion thanks to his truth of godly way. Boom, boom, boom. Every time the stage ruler landed another attack, the shock and disbelief in his eyes intensified. In all his years, he had never encountered such a strange thing before. At one point, he even began to doubt himself. Was he too weak, or was this human too strong? Chapter 3144, The Son of Light. The three girls' hearts sank at the sight of what happened to Zen. However, the stage ruler had an unusual expression of shock on his face. Yan gazed at the black mud, but she couldn't find any trace of Zen's body. Under such devastating attacks, Zen might have been severely crushed into the mud. Elvenia was still stuck in the swamp, her whole body covered in dirt. She struggled to get up from the swamp, but her body was seriously injured that she had difficulty moving. Boom, boom, boom. Out of nowhere, the stage ruler struck out another 10 powerful attacks to the area where Zen was previously standing. As Elvenia witnessed it, confusion appeared on her anxious face. She was wondering if it was even necessary to do that since Zen could not fight back anymore. Furthermore, she noticed the restless expression on the stage ruler's face. Immediately after, the stage ruler unleashed another barrage of attacks. This time, he had struck out at least 20 strong ones. With this, the three girls realized that there must be something wrong. They didn't know what exactly was happening, but they were sure that the behavior of the huge lizard was definitely odd. The stage ruler's strength was limited. After releasing more than 30 rounds of attack using his full strength, he finally got exhausted. He took a step back, and heavy breaths came out from his nostrils. Elvenia, Yan, and Natalie all fixed their eyes on the location where Zen was previously standing. A huge pit was created in the area due to the relentless attacks of the stage ruler. The pit was then filled with black mud up to the surface. Soon after, the mud on the pit parted as Zen's figure started to emerge out of the mud, completely unharmed. Zen is fine, Yan exclaimed with a trembling voice. On the other hand, Natalie was rendered speechless as if she had seen a ghost. Is that even possible? In Natalie's mind, it was already an incredible miracle that Zen was able to enter the other shore with his corporeal body. This time, though she had doubts, she remembered that Yan had always described her brother as omnipotent. For this reason, she was starting to accept that Zen could really be more amazing than she thought he was. Needless to say, Zen had proven himself for being unscathed after receiving about 30 unreserved attacks from the ruler of stage 14 of the other shore. Natalie thought that this kind of thing could only happen in dreams, but she completely knew that this was real since her soul of light had already entered the other shore. Meanwhile, the worry on Elvenia's face was thoroughly replaced by astonishment and relief. It seems like you're on your limit. Zen raised his head and gave a faint smile to the stage ruler. You, mongrel, how did you do it? The stage ruler stared at Zen as he couldn't fully comprehend how Zen could be completely unharmed with all the attacks that he had thrown at him. He was so sure that the body of the young human shouldn't be this strong. He thought that there seemed to be something incomprehensible happening to him. However, no matter how smart the stage ruler was, he wouldn't be able to grasp something that was way beyond his knowledge. Furthermore, no one had ever been able to see through Zen's truth of godly way. What makes you think that I'll tell you? Zen answered. Besides, if you don't know, then you have already lost. As a purified being, Elvenia didn't possess any theurgy other than the free control of the great Sanskrit light, and a strong corporeal body. Therefore, Zen had speculated that this huge lizard might have had the same situation. Since the giant lizard became the stage ruler, no one ever dared to treat him this way. Previously, all corporeal bodies and souls of light that passed through stage 14 of the other shore, as well as the creatures rooted in stage 14 of the other shore, respected and feared him. Since then, all he received were reverent gazes. This was for the first time that he had heard some ruthless mockery since he became the stage ruler. Upon hearing all this, he raised his head and roared viciously. White light burst out from under his scales. With the refraction of the scales, the light scattered into 7 colors. The light traveled a very far distance. After handing Yan and Natalie to the stage ruler, the chief flag monkey tried to leave the black swamp and dashed away without stopping. As the stage ruler began to roar, the royal monkeys had just left the edge of the black swamp. At the same moment, they suddenly saw a flash of blinding light. "Hey, that's the light of a purified being," one of the royal monkeys yelled. "Run, hurry up, we're going to be vaporized by that thing." Another royal monkey covered his face and ran away without turning back. When the royal monkeys saw the light, it meant that the light was already being transmitted to where they were. Although their location was quite far away from the stage ruler, the great Sanskrit light was invincible. It could devour everything in the dark region. Realizing that the situation was getting worse, the chief flag monkey rode on a horse and also ran away at full speed. However, it was kind of too late as the light was quickly devouring the demonic plants and grasses along the way. Eventually, the spreading light caught up to the royal monkeys, including the chief flag monkey. After the chief flag monkey got promoted as the commander of the royal monkey race, he had successfully led the race and made great development. Under his command, their race was even ranked first in stage 14 of the other shore. They were able to trample their old nemesis, the one-eyed creatures. In the end, no one thought that the commander of the royal monkey race as well as his coldness monkey guards would die in such an unexpected way. On the other hand, Mercer and Miller of the insect master race were staying farther from the black swamp. The brothers originally planned to follow Zen, putting their lives at stake. However, as Zen and Elvenia were about to enter the black swamp, Zen stopped them and told them to simply wait outside. "It's that light, it's coming closer." Fear was written all over their faces. Even the holy beetles, who had been completely tamed, were trembling in fear. The creatures in the dark region had an instinctive fear towards the great Sanskrit light. However, the two brothers didn't run away. As they looked around, they saw a large pit nearby. The two of them jumped into the pit without hesitation. The great Sanskrit light was indeed powerful, but it still had to erode everything on the surface before it could touch the two, who were hiding inside the deep pit. Eventually, they successfully evaded the looming disaster. When the light gradually disappeared, the entire black swamp disappeared as well. Along with the swamp, tens of thousands of snakes, insects, and some other shore races also vanished. As creatures of the light region, Zen and the 3 girls weren't affected by the great Sanskrit light. Since the whole swamp was eroded, the solid rocks beneath it all showed up. Standing on the 2 huge rocks, Zen and Elvenia stared at the stage ruler. A pair of light wings grew on the back of the stage ruler. White light twisted into lines that covered his entire body, illuminating the surrounding sky. "You don't know much about the purified beings, do you? I will show you what power the Son of Light could possess," the stage ruler uttered with a dull smile. As he finished speaking, the twisted lines gathered around his body to his chest, forming a spiral pattern. Boom! A white wave of light shot out from his chest, dashing directly towards Zen's head. Crack, crack, crack. Just as the wave of light was about to hit Zen, the rocks around his feet already cracked due to the pressure being imposed by it. "I see. Your power became much stronger, huh?" Zen's pupils slightly contracted as the thunder wings on his back surfaced. If Zen used the thunder wings in the dark region beforehand, the internal momentum of the thunderstorm godly way would instantly be devoured by the darkness. However, now that the darkness had been completely expelled by the stage ruler, there was nothing to hinder Zen from using the thunder wings. Bang! As the thunder wings created a loud sound on Zen's back, he turned into a flash of lightning and flew sideward. At the same time, he grabbed Elvenia, who was severely injured, in his arms. Chapter 3145, Scorpion Poison. As the light fell from the air, a visible shock wave surged in all directions. The light penetrated everything that dared cross its path, forming a mighty column that pierced through the dark region. Just as the circle of shock waves spread out, Zen grabbed hold of Elvinia and quickly flew away from the site of destruction. Elvinia held on tight to Zen. What kind of method is that? How can it be so powerful? She exclaimed, eyes wide with shock. Both she and the stage ruler were purified beings, but this method was completely unknown to her. True, she could control the great Sanskrit light at will, but never to this extent. How do you expect me to know if even you don't know? Zen laughed bitterly, making sure that his grip on her was tight so that she wouldn't fall. The stage ruler snorted coldly when he failed to hit Zen. His light wings flashed behind him and he immediately flew towards Zen at top speed. As he flew, rays of light gathered and spread from his chest in a spiral pattern. Elvinia pointed to the sky in panic. It's coming. As soon as she shouted her warning, the light wave from the stage ruler's chest shot straight towards them. Whoosh! The earth trembled as the light wave descended. Zen felt the terrifying pressure without even turning his head. With gritted teeth, he willed himself to go even faster, the thunder wings on his back cracking as he accelerated. Pop! As the light wave descended, the shock wave spread along the dark region, completely annihilating everything in its path. Zen moved Elvinia in front of him and used his back to block the shock wave force while using it as a boost to go even faster. It was a high-speed chase between Zen's thunder wings and the stage ruler's imposing light wings. While this chase went on, the creatures of the dark region worried greatly for their lives. The shock wave from the light column would destroy everything in its path within a 10-mile radius. What made them even more terrified was the stage ruler's wings that constantly released great Sanskrit light. Wherever Zen and the stage ruler went, destruction surely followed as sections of the dark region eroded in the presence of such imposing light. The stage ruler's wings plowed out an ever-growing ditch more than 200 feet wide and 30 miles long. Zen also felt the great pressure from the light wave. He had no doubt that the power of this light wave was beyond the limit of his physical body. If the chaotic source spirits were to be exhausted, then Zen could face the possibility of being seriously injured or even dying. Be careful on the left. Elvinia reminded him. It's at the right rear. He immediately flew towards the left to dodge the light waves, but the stage ruler suddenly flipped and overtook Zen. It was with great shock that Zen suddenly found the stage ruler in front of him, especially when he suddenly opened his mouth. Whoosh! A long, thin tongue came out of his mouth and headed towards Zen at high speed. Zen never thought in a million years that the stage ruler would attack him with his tongue. He immediately threw Elvinia away, not wanting to involve her in whatever their opponent had in store for them. Zen couldn't help but wonder if the stage ruler wanted to use his tongue to grab him and pull him towards his mouth. He shivered at the thought of being eaten. However, once the tongue reached him, it didn't wrap around his body like he expected, but instead, it drew back and hit him ruthlessly. Bang! The force was enough to send Zen flying right into the light wave. Pop! As Zen's body was enveloped by the light, it popped and shone brightly. The light had formed into a ball that slowly descended from the sky. A trace of cold satisfaction appeared on the stage ruler's face. It took a lot out of him to deal with this human. Natalie could only look at this scene with distress. Zen, she muttered, he might be truly defeated this time. Yan couldn't say anything, also overwhelmed by what had just happened. When Zen threw Elvinia away, the young woman landed hard onto the ground. However, the pain was completely overwhelmed with a strong feeling of sadness and worry when she saw what happened to Zen. It took 12 whole seconds for the light ball to descend and gradually fade away. In its spot was a large crater where a creature lay. It was the same size as a human being, but its appearance was utterly horrendous with spikes extending from its back and a tail that sprouted from its bottom. What is this? Where's Zen? Natalie asked, her eyes filled with panic at what she saw. Yan could only stare at the monster in confusion. Where's my brother? She also wailed. Elvinia was rendered speechless from the shock of seeing Zen in such a form. She had to blink a few times to make sure she wasn't seeing things. It wasn't just them, even the stage ruler was shocked at the result of his own attack. He descended into the crater and landed just a couple of steps away from the monster. Whoosh! Just as they were ruminating on their confusion, the monster's limbs suddenly sprang up. It took the opportunity of its opponent's vulnerability and launched an attack. Before the stage ruler had a chance to spread his wings and fly away, the monster had already stuck itself to his body. Puff! The stage ruler's skin was rough and thick. When Zen threw a javelin at him before, the javelin failed to even break through the outer layer. However, this monster managed to pierce through him by just using the spikes on its tail. Panic danced behind the stage ruler's eyes. He waved a sharp claw at his opponent, but the monster was surprisingly agile and avoided his attack. The stage ruler didn't even get the chance to move away as the monster's tail stiffened and stabbed his neck. Not satisfied, the monster drew its tail back and once again let the black spikes pierce through the stage ruler's abdomen. It took 3 consecutive stabs before the monster left his body alone and let him plop down onto the ground. Soon after, a strange thing happened to the stage ruler's body. 3 rays of green light began to spread from his chest, his neck, and his abdomen. As the light spread, his black thick skin softened and disintegrated into green mud. "What is this? What kind of poison is this?" the stage ruler screamed. He knew his body was strong, so there was no way any ordinary poison would have this type of effect. In his desperation, the stage ruler activated the great Sanskrit light and set it to the maximum in order to try and refill his body with energy. Unfortunately, no matter how powerful his technique was, it proved ineffective in curing his poisoning. Swoosh, 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 the stage ruler panicked and flew into the air, roaring in the sky. However, his struggle was futile. It only took about 30 seconds for him to exhaust himself and fall onto the cold, hard ground. The light wings on his back dimmed and his aura completely disappeared in a flash. When he fell, the darkness that had once been dispersed began to close in. Before the place was completely shrouded, Elvenia waved her hand and a ray of white light fell from the sky to illuminate the vicinity. She made her way towards the monster that now crawled on the ground. She stopped just a couple of paces away, careful not to startle it. "Zen," she called out. This monster's outline was blurry, so it might have entered the other shore with its physical body like Zen did. However, it was simply too different from Zen's appearance. Chapter 3146, The Land of Inheritance. The monster that lay prostrate on the ground suddenly jumped up and stood upright. The hideous thing looked a bit like the ghost scorpion. Yet, its appearance was more ferocious and aggressive, especially its thick scorpion tail, which glowed with a dark green light. It looked like it was ready to kill anyone who approached it at any time. When Elvenia saw the monster get up, she instinctively took a few steps back. The monster's figure looked a little blurry and it was hard to see it clearly, just like when Zen had entered the other shore with his physical body. Elvenia knew that this creature was most likely Zen, but she was still a little afraid and remained vigilant. "Is my appearance too horrible?" Zen suddenly piped in. Elvenia sighed in relief when she heard the familiar voice. "You should have spoken earlier. Why did you frighten me?" she complained. "This is the first time I have seen such an expression from you," Zen said with a smile. A red flush crept up Elvenia's cheeks in embarrassment. "It's also the first time I've seen you look like this," she snorted. "Fortunately, we are on the other shore. If we were in the Oneness Sky Palace, I'm afraid I would have really scared you." Zen retracted the protruding bones as he spoke. The bone pieces folded into his body, then the tail, the spikes on his back, and the wide arms all disappeared and he returned to normal. Afterwards, he went straight to the stage ruler. The stage ruler's life energy had been cut off and his entire body was covered in green mud. "Zen, are you okay?" Yan shouted from her position in the array that trapped her. The array beneath her feet separated her from the outside world. Thus, both she and Natalie were not affected by the destruction. Zen nodded at his sister in response. The thunder wings on his back flashed and he swiftly flew towards the back of the stage ruler's corpse. Then, he held the entire array in his arms and moved it down. "Step back," he said. In turn, Yan and Natalie went back to the other side of the array. Zen raised his hand and gently chopped the array, which caused it to explode and then collapse. Next, he stepped forward and took his sister in his arms. "I'm sorry, I got you involved for no reason," he apologized. His sister did not deserve to suffer from such a catastrophe. Indeed, it was unfortunate that she was kidnapped and trapped in the dark region when she did not offend anyone. Yan pursed her lips and consoled Zen softly, "It's not for no reason. Your enemy is also my enemy." Although the two siblings had chosen different super forces to join, they had the same stand in the end. The accident was completely because of the fact that the other shore was too complicated and they had gotten set up. Speaking of this, I am the one who was involved for no reason. "Zen, shouldn't you apologize to me?" Natalie, who was behind them, chided with a grin. Just before they were kidnapped, the Star Falcon race couldn't tell which one of them was Yan. Thus, they abducted both of them together. Truly, Natalie had been quite unlucky as well. Just as Zen was about to speak, Elvenia interjected and said, "You should feel lucky to be saved. You are dreaming to get an apology." Since Yan was Zen's sister, Elvenia usually ignored whatever words or emotions she conveyed. As for Natalie, Elvenia ruthlessly dissed her. Then again, Natalie was also known for her arrogance in Pear Hill. Her face froze when she heard Elvinia's words. "Why are you talking like that?" she hissed. "So what?" Elvinia shot back. "Elvinia," Zen quickly interrupted them and frowned. Despite that, Elvinia wasn't angry and she did not argue with Zen. Instead, she retreated to the side with a smile, which made Natalie extremely mad. When Zen was about to console Natalie, his eyes suddenly lit up. He looked over and saw that a circle of light floated above the stage ruler's corpse. The circle of light revolved around the air once, then it floated straight towards him. "What is that?" Natalie asked. As soon as she finished speaking, the circle of light came and enveloped Zen at lightning speed. Once the circle of light had fully covered him, he disappeared in front of Elvinia and the others like magic. The three women were left standing there in a daze, and did not know what just happened. Even Zen did not expect such a thing to happen, either. The circle of light swooped down on him too fast and he didn't have the time to dodge. While he was in the light, he only felt the sky and earth spin continuously around him. When he opened his eyes again, everything he saw was filled with light, as if he had fallen into a world full of blazing brightness. There was nothing but a vast expanse of white in all directions. "Where am I?" "Elvinia, Yan," he called out, but there was no response. It looked like that the circle of light had teleported him into another place. He squatted down and touched the ground for a while, and he felt a cold and smooth floor. This is not an illusion, but a real world. When he came to this conclusion, he began to walk forward as his footsteps echoed loudly in the empty space. After he had wandered aimlessly for a distance in the snow-white world, he felt that his eyes had adapted to the environment. Eventually, he was slowly able to distinguish some white outlines. The white pillars in the distance gradually revealed themselves. There seemed to be something among the pillars, but it was still very difficult for him to see what it was. Even if he was very close to these pillars, he still couldn't see anything but white. "No, 9527, Master Regal Jade, what's this place?" At that moment, he could only turn to the two of them for help. "I don't know." No 9527's voice came through. When Zen had used the bloodline of the Chaos Ancient God just now, number 9527 felt extremely alarmed. As for the snow-white world, number 9527 had never seen it before. Meanwhile, the Regal Jade Spirit first observed the surroundings for a while after Zen had summoned him, then asked, "Did you kill a purified being?" "Yes," confirmed Zen. "I see. This is the land of inheritance of the purified beings," the Regal Jade Spirit said. "The land of inheritance?" Zen asked in confusion. "Well, after a purified being dies, their killer will replace them and become the new stage ruler, which I'm certain of, but the land of inheritance is just what we, the Regal Jade civilization, call it. I haven't been to this place before. As for how to inherit the title of stage ruler and what this white world is really called, I have no idea," the Regal Jade Spirit explained. "The new stage ruler?" asked Zen. Needless to say, he was shocked. "If I become a stage ruler, will I be bound to stage 14? He asked again. Generally speaking, the stage rulers on the other shore were limited to the stages they had dominated. Among the numerous stage rulers, Elvinia was the only exception. She had only encountered problems when she crossed the energy vortex. The situation in the lust world, however, was probably different from that in the desire world. There was a reason Zen was worried. It might be possible, at least, I've never seen a stage ruler like Elvinia, who could leave the stage she dominated, the Regal Jade Spirit answered honestly. Upon hearing those words, Zen immediately became wary. Becoming a purified being would enable him to travel freely in the dark region, but the price would be to stay on stage 14 forever. For him, the loss simply wasn't worth the gain. Chapter 3147, The Images on the Slates. Since Zen didn't know what to do yet, he wandered in the white world for a while. Apart from the pillars, he was still unable to distinguish anything else. He felt helpless and eventually, he just sat on the smooth floor. I don't think I need to worry about whether or not I would be bound to stage 14 now. It's a problem for me to even leave here, he said with a bitter smile. The Regal Jade Spirit and number 9527 both remained silent. They observed the place really carefully, but they couldn't even see the vague pillars. Thus, they couldn't offer any help to Zen. There were a total of 19 purified beings on the 19 stages of the entire desire world. Those purified beings rarely participated in the feuds among many great races, as they were either independent individuals or chose to live in a remote place and protect their own races, not paying any attention to the affairs that happened in the world. Now, even though the regal Jade civilization had once been one of the 10 great civilizations, they still didn't know much about the purified beings. Meanwhile in the dark region, Elvinia took care of Yan and Natalie so none of the creatures in the area would dare provoke or attack them. Truth be told, the stage ruler's abnormal behavior had already caused a great uproar in the dark region. As a result, those creatures that hid in the dark region risked their lives and sent their forces to investigate the stage ruler's whereabouts. However, they were extremely shocked to find out that the stage ruler was dead when they saw his corpse lying prostrate from afar. The creatures of the dark region naturally wanted to attack Elvinia, but when they saw her activate the great Sanskrit light, they didn't even dare approach her anymore. As for Zen, he simply sat quietly in the vast, white world. Since the regal Jade spirit said that this was the land of inheritance, there must be a method to inherit the title of the stage ruler. He gently waved his hand in the air, but didn't feel anything unusual. The great Sanskrit light should also be a kind of energy, and based on the light the giant lizard had unleashed before, the method of using such energy should also have different levels. Elvinia, however, couldn't release that level of light wave like the lizard did. Moreover, the process of Elvinia becoming a purified being was also quite strange. She did not enter this land of inheritance, and the one who had gone in instead was that pig-faced monster called Teague. But just as Teague had become a purified being and was about to come out, he merged with Elvinia. If that pig-faced monster can make it, then I can make it too. Since the great Sanskrit light is a kind of energy, there must be a way to control it. A few moments later, Zen sat cross-legged and meditated. 5 minutes had passed. An hour had passed. 2 hours had passed. The white-colored world was still as snow-white as ever, and it couldn't be touched, nor anything could be seen through within it. Despite that, Zen didn't feel anxious in the slightest as he calmly stared at the white scenery in front of him. After he had stared quietly in the same position for 6 hours, he finally found something different. The white seemed to have moved, like the way the clouds in the sky rolled subtly. What happened? The white moved, he muttered, his brows arched up. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He turned to look at the pillars again, and the outline of the pillars became more distinct. I'll continue to observe. Another 4 hours had passed, and the number of times the white changed had increased. The white light was no longer a motionless scene, and instead it continued to roll. As it did so, Zen also noticed that there were some shiny dots within the white light, which he didn't see before. Those light dots slowly floated around like aimless insects. Does the key point lie in these light dots? He mumbled. As soon as the thought came to his mind, he stood up and walked towards them. The second he stepped forward, however, the aura in the entire space became chaotic. All the light dots fluctuated with the change of the aura and quickly escaped from his side. These light dots are almost weightless. A slight fluctuation of energy will make them float. He thought for a bit again, then summoned the Wing King's feather. When he moved once more, the feather reduced the impact on the surrounding space by a huge amount. Just to be on the safe side, he even used the truth of cultivation nature. Swoosh! The light dots still slightly fluctuated when he approached them again, but the fluctuation was minor. At the very least, it was manageable. He walked straight towards the light dots and tried to make them meet his eyes. When the light spots merged with his pupils, he suddenly felt that everything around him had become clearer. Indeed, I was right. It turned out that if one wanted to see the world clearly, they had to integrate those light dots into their eyes. Zen had remained motionless since he entered this world. A lot of light spots accidentally entered into his eyes, which naturally made him see more and more clearly. However, the process was too slow. After all, the absorption of the light dots was purely based on luck. Now that he had found how everything worked, how could he still hold back? In the next second, he briskly walked forward and continued to absorb the light dots. After about 5 minutes, he had already absorbed 100 light spots into his eyes. The rolling white clouds and fog from before slowly dimmed, and the outline of the surroundings became clearer and clearer. Only then did he realize that he was standing in a white palace. On the left side of the palace stood many huge pillars, and in the center of the pillars were white slates. There were abstract images drawn on the slates. Although the images were abstract, he still could distinguish them. This is a jellyfish. This is a wolf. This is a giant lizard. Is it that stage ruler? His eyes flashed as soon as he saw the image of the giant lizard, as if he had understood something. He swept past the images on the slates while he counted them. There are a total of 20 slates here. Are there 20 purified beings in the entire desire world? He said. No, there are only 19 stages in the desire world. Theoretically, there are 19 purified beings, the regal jade spirit told him. Although the regal jade spirit couldn't see those images, he could understand something from Zen's mumblings. But don't forget that there appeared a purified being in the lust world all of a sudden, he added. There was originally no purified being in the first 13 stages, and Elvenia was the first one. Upon hearing the regal jade spirit's reminder, Zen looked up and saw a strange pig-faced monster drawn on the slate on the top. However, that image of the strange pig-faced monster was a little special. There was a woman's head on his fat pig body. Of course, he couldn't help but laugh when he saw it. Something wrong had happened when the pig-faced monster occupied Elvenia's soul, so it affected the land of inheritance. That was why it had shown such a mixed image. After all, the purified being was originally a pig-faced monster, while Elvenia was just an occupant. He wondered what Elvenia would think if she saw this image. Once he had scanned all the portraits of the purified beings, he looked at the other side of the palace. His usual expression suddenly turned into surprise. On the other side was a huge slate with densely packed Sanskrit words drawn on it. There were so many Sanskrit words, to the point that the number had far exceeded anything that Zen had seen before. Chapter 3148, A Special Cultivation. A single Sanskrit word normally recorded a great amount of information. Zen was quite taken aback when he found an abundance of Sanskrit words. What sort of things needed to be recorded with so many of them? Sensing Zen's emotional fluctuation, the regal jade spirit asked, Zen, what do you see? So many Sanskrit words, Zen exclaimed in excitement. A great number. Even the spirit was rather surprised. He was quite interested in the land of inheritance for the purified beings. It could involve higher-level secrets of the instant civilization, after all. Yes, Zen's gaze swept across the slate, giving him a rough estimate. There are about 300 to 400 Sanskrit words in total. They all look strange to me. I should ask Jeffrey. These days, Jeffrey was growing more and more proficient in deciphering Sanskrit words. Every time Zen spotted a new one, he'd think of him. But before Zen could finish his words, the fact that he was now on the other shore suddenly came to mind. It was impossible for him to bring Jeffrey there to decipher Sanskrit words. Even if he could, Jeffrey probably wouldn't be able to see the words with his naked eyes because of the white light. Neither number 9527 nor the regal jade spirit could see them, after all. It was even more unrealistic to copy them with duplicating stone tablets, as it was impossible for Zen to bring those to the other shore. While the regal jade spirit tried figuring out what to do, Zen's eyes were suddenly fixated on the slate. The first Sanskrit word seemed to have moved. The second one followed, and then the third, and the fourth, and so on. Rows of Sanskrit words began rolling like waves as they began flipping one after another. Zen's gaze was completely pulled in by the movement. I think you can try lending Jeffrey your eyesight in the place of his, said the regal jade spirit. Perhaps that will work, but Zen paid no mind to his words, let alone responded. Zen, what do you think? After calling his name a few times, the spirit finally realized Zen's unusual state. He was standing as still as a statue, staring blankly ahead. In Zen's vision, the Sanskrit words on the slate had completely come to life. They were like several little rats tumbling about. As they did, their movements conveyed specific information. Zen wasn't absorbing the information by reading, instead, he was gaining understanding rather automatically when he went through the words. In the past, Zen needed Jeffrey to decipher each Sanskrit word he had come across. But these words on the slate before him were somehow different, they instantly conveyed their meaning. When Zen's gaze reached the final word, they all began flipping in reverse. Each word flipped at a different angle, conveying new information. For a long while, Zen stood still, watching the words move around. A couple of hours later, the words finally stopped rolling. Zen, can you hear me? The regal jade spirit's voice seemed to be coming from afar, but Zen gradually regained his consciousness until he seemed responsive. What happened to you just now? Asked the spirit. There was excitement on Zen's face as he pointed at the slate. I've comprehended the words on that slate. Really, can you decipher Sanskrit words now? The other asked in surprise. But Zen shook his head before giving the regal jade spirit a rundown of what had happened on the slate. The information within these Sanskrit words must be a unique theurgy. When these contents entered my head, it was like I fell into a strange state, he added. It was the first time he had ever experienced such a special cultivation. As he spoke, he reached out and flicked his fingers. With his eyes narrowing in concentration, a white light began gathering at his fingertips, forming a dense ball of light. Just as Elvinia could, Zen could now freely control the great Sanskrit light. When Zen turned his hand over, his body absorbed the light, forming winding lines and spiraling patterns on his palm. Swoosh! A small light wave emerged from the spiral. With a flick of Zen's finger, the light wave shot upwards. While the light wave's power was far inferior to that of the giant lizard, it held the same form and effect. It turns out that the giant lizard's powerful light wave was something learned from the slate, the illuminating wave, it's called. Elvinia hasn't been to this world, so she hasn't learned it, nor does she know how to employ it. Most interesting was the fact that this method of using the great Sanskrit light was beyond description. Once he observed the Sanskrit words, movement, Zen grasped the method rather naturally. But he later realized that he couldn't explain how the theurgy worked with mere words, the knowledge had become a kind of instinct. So do you know the way out of here? The regal jade spirit asked in return. The way out. Zen's gaze swept across the area, finding nothing but pillars. No door or anything of the sort could be found on the walls, there was no exit whatsoever. It seemed to be an entirely isolated space. But as he wondered about leaving, the theurgy within his mind began working on its own. Buzz! A circle of light enveloped Zen's body before he instantly disappeared within it. In the next moment, he had returned to the dark region. For several hours, Elvinia, Yan, and Natalie had been waiting there. After a while of boredom, they soon began chatting away about Zen. Distracted by all the chatter, they had eventually forgotten the little conflict between Natalie and Elvinia. At Elvinia and Natalie's pressing request, Yan told them about Zen's childhood, as well as his early adventure in the eastern region. Zen's life stories sounded incredible to the two girls who had grown up in the source world. While Elvinia wasn't too astonished because she had already heard some stories from Lavender, Natalie's face was full of disbelief. Everyone in the source world was born with great power, after all. So long as they had adequate talent, becoming a true god wasn't all that difficult. Zen, on the other hand, was born among the lowest level of beings in his father's inner world. The fact that he had reached his present level coming from that situation was nothing short of miraculous, Natalie believed. A circle of light suddenly appeared beside them, from where Zen emerged. He's back. Yan's eyes lit up with absolute joy upon seeing her brother's safe return. What exactly is this circle of light? How did it take you away? Elvinia asked curiously. You can check it out for yourself if you want it, you know. Zen threw an easy smile in Elvinia's direction. He wanted to send her into the Palace of Light. After she grasped the Sanskrit words on the slate, she would get the answer on her own. But surprisingly, the circle of light didn't appear at his command. The three women stared at him curiously, wondering what he meant. Zen smiled wryly in mild embarrassment. Well, it seems that I failed. Chapter 3149, A New Stage Ruler. Purified beings couldn't enter the Palace of Light at will. Otherwise, the giant lizard would have already hidden within the palace, when he found he stood no chance to defeat Zen. The latter had just mastered the great Sanskrit light, but he couldn't create the circle of light. Now, all he could do was wait for the next best opportunity. Now that Yan was safe, there was no need for him to stay in the dark region. When the four of them were ready to leave, some of the creatures hiding in the shadows surrounded Zen and knelt before him, kowtowing devoutly. Otherwise known as the stage rulers, the purified beings had absolute strength, recognized as a spiritual symbol by many creatures. Once the great lizard passed away, it meant new authority appeared in stage 14. For a moment, Zen and the others paused. If they continued moving forward, the white light would annihilate all these creatures from the dark region. Get up, everyone, you can leave now, Zen simply said. His words had all the creatures standing up and bowing to him respectfully before retreating in all directions. But something returned to Zen's mind. He pointed at a one-eyed monster that happened to be nearby. He had seen the one-eyed monsters in stage 13, they had even tried to snatch away the civilization artifact. They seemed to be widely distributed on the other shore, much like the royal monkey race. As it turned out, the one-eyed monster Zen pointed at was the leader of his race. The appearance of a new stage ruler wasn't something that the races on the other shore would be pleased to hear about, but that wasn't something for them to decide. They had to spend some time understanding the temper and preferences of the new stage ruler. But the last one was ruthless and tyrannical. Because the royal monkey race fawned over him for so long, the stage ruler tended to favor them. For the one-eyed monsters, at least, the shift in power was a good thing. The leader came forward and cupped his hands toward Zen. What can I do for you? I have some friends in the dark region. Help me take care of them, Zen said flatly. May I know who you are talking about? The leader's eyes lit up at Zen's order. It was an excellent opportunity to please the new stage ruler. It would be highly beneficial to satisfy any of Zen's requests. The Insect Master Race. The Insect Master Race. The leader frowned in confusion before he realized that the Insect Master Race was a small, unknown group under the royal monkey's control. If someone else had requested it, the leader would have probably considered the royal monkey race's attitude. But it was none other than Zen who had given the order. I will arrange everything well. The leader was overjoyed. This way, he wasn't only doing Zen a favor, but also taking the opportunity to suppress the royal monkey race. It was an excellent opportunity for the one-eyed monsters. Taking the order, the leader retreated. Then, Zen and his group headed west. Upon arriving at the edge of the dark region, Zen asked Elvinia to pull out the black box. He then released the monsters from it, including the shape-shifting spirit. We're already in the dark region, so I shall fulfill my promise and let you go, Zen said. The monsters had been imprisoned in the Iron House for countless years. Finally, they could taste freedom. All of them were excited as they explored their new surroundings. Some of them had come from the upper stages of the other shore, but their strength was suppressed after entering this lower stage. Given more time, though, they'd make a great splash in the dark region. Soon, the monsters had scattered in all directions, save for the shape-shifting spirit. Why aren't you leaving? Zen asked curiously. The spirit remained still with a complicated look in its eyes. Although it used to be a pet, it could fend for itself in the outside world. But for some reason, it felt that it should follow Zen. The one who opened the Iron House was by no means ordinary, after all. I want to follow you, it suddenly spoke up. Follow me. For a moment, Zen was stunned, but he recovered quickly. You can follow me, he started with a smile. But you know, I won't be staying in the dark region most of the time. I'm usually in the light region. You'll have to stay in this small space. It was the box emitting black light that he was referring to. That's fine with me, said the shape-shifting spirit with a shrug. For countless years, it had been imprisoned in the iron cage. The black box made no difference to it. This spirit could turn into any creature, a useful skill for critical moments. Once Zen let it enter the black box and put it away in Elvinia's space ring, they stepped out of the dark region. Mercer and Miller had to wait quite a while in the cave before they could climb out. They didn't want to get caught in the battle of the purified beings. Without seeing Zen for some time, all they could do was ride the holy beetles and leave. Nothing happened on their way back. After they reported what had happened in the Black Marsh, all the insect masters were filled with fear. Didn't the benefactor go to find the royal monkeys? Why did he defy the stage ruler? An insect master eagerly asked. On the surface, the insect master race had always fallen to tragedy at the hands of the royal monkey race. In truth, it was because the stage ruler needed to devour the dark nether bugs. But most of the creatures of the dark region believed in the stage ruler, and the insect master race was no exception. While they carried some resentment in their hearts, it was more for the royal monkey race than the stage ruler. Challenging the stage ruler means courting death, another respected insect master shook his head disapprovingly. I'm afraid that the royal monkeys will blame our race soon after. We will. Mercer and Miller's news put an extremely grim atmosphere over the insect masters. They were now all imagining soon being slaughtered by the royal monkey race. Just as the insect masters seemed down, a set of noisy footsteps resounded from afar. Afraid that the royal monkey race was approaching, they stared nervously into the distance. From the darkness, over a dozen figures emerged in succession. They were the one-eyed monsters. These creatures could fight against the royal monkeys head-on. Naturally, the insect masters felt far inferior to them. As the two races were far from each other, they never had much interaction. Are you insect masters? A one-eyed monster suddenly asked in a low voice. Yes, several of them answered automatically. You don't have to be so courteous, said the monster in a friendly tone. The new stage ruler asked us to take good care of you. This place is too close to the royal monkey's territory. Please follow us. We must lead you out. The new stage ruler. We have a new stage ruler. Who is it? All the insect masters were completely dumbfounded by the news. Even Mercer and Miller were stunned. They both had a good guess about who it was. Chapter 3150, Skywater City. It wasn't difficult to verify their conjecture from the one-eyed monster. When the one-eyed monster told the insect master race that the new stage ruler was a human being, all the insect masters had become excited. Only then did Mercer and Miller understand why the arrogant one-eyed monsters were treating them so politely. That night, all of the insect masters packed up and drove all kinds of poisonous insects and ants to move with the one-eyed monsters. A different fate awaited them. As the insect master race wasn't strong, they might not be able to achieve much in the dark region even if they were given more time. But under the protection of the one-eyed monsters, they wouldn't be as miserable as before. They could even dare to hope a little. It was peaceful in the light region of stage 14 of the other shore these days. The Sky Water City had previously been in chaos. It would collapse even without the attack of the giants and the Guide Weasel race. However, the originally aggressive giant race and Guide Weasel race had suddenly retreated to the Myriad Spirits City under Zen's order. Many of the large races in the Sky Water City thought that the two races showed weakness and cowardice before the Star Falcon race. This naturally deepened the prestige that the Star Falcon race felt, and they in turn intimidated many large races in the Sky Water City, which helped the Star Falcon race stabilize the situation. In the early hours of the morning, over 1,000 white apes had gathered outside the Sky Water City. The white ape race used to be part of the Sky Water City, but they were later expelled by the Star Falcon race. This time, Whitehead, from the white ape race, helped the Star Falcon race find Yan and led Zen into the dark region. The Star Falcon race, pleased with their contribution, bestowed on the white ape race the right to enter the Sky Water City again. They also gave them a large area within the city. The leader of the white ape race walked ahead, Whitehead closely following him. Whitehead looked like a hero coming back with great honor as he walked with his head held high. It was all thanks to him that the white ape race had achieved what it had. The leader had even chosen him as his successor. After they entered the Sky Water City, the leader would let him succeed him as the new leader of the race. Two massive star falcons sat on the city wall, staring down from their perch. These were two elders of the Star Falcon race, Hanley and Tomas, who were guarding the city. When the Star Falcon race had lost, these two elders had taken charge of the situation and sent the 6 Star Falcons to take Yan away. Hanley, why are you letting these losers enter the city? Tomas said, staring at the white apes disdainfully. The white ape race had once been expelled from the Sky Water City and was no longer qualified to enter it. The white ape race helped us at a critical moment, Hanley answered in earnest. So what? We can reward them accordingly. But if we allow such good-for-nothing creatures to enter the Sky Water City, other races will laugh at us, Tomas said heatedly. It doesn't matter, Hanley said, his eyes shining shrewdly. We have to let every race in the Sky Water City know that even now, there are forces that choose to follow us. We won't lose anything by giving the white ape race a piece of land. What we are doing is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Tomas nodded. Is there still no news from the dark region? He asked. Hanley shook his head. All of these are trifles, he said, pointing at the white apes below. What I care most about is news of the dark region. The woman called Elvinia is a purified being. I'm afraid even the royal monkey race will find it difficult to deal with her. The creatures in the dark region were generally stronger than those in the light region. But Elvinia was a purified being, the nemesis of the creatures in the dark region. The 2 human beings haven't returned yet. They must have died in the dark region. Tomas said, don't forget that there is a stage ruler in the dark region. At the mention of the stage ruler, Hanley's confidence increased. The Star Falcon race didn't know much about the dark region, but they had a general idea of what was going on there. The royal monkey race would most likely take advantage of the stage ruler and kill the 2 human beings. If the stage ruler were to really take action against them, they would have already died there. I'll send someone to the dark region to inquire about it, Hanley said, nodding. Hanley felt a sudden tremor under his feet before the whole wall began to shake. Rumble. What happened? Tomas's eyes were wide as saucers, surprised. The members of the white ape race that had entered the Sky Water City one by one, also looked up at the shaking city wall. What is going on? The leader of the white ape race said. Not knowing what was going on, Whitehead turned around and shouted, members of the white ape race. Hurry up, enter the city as soon as possible. Crack. It was at this moment that the sound of something being ripped apart echoed through the air. A huge crack, extending from the top to the bottom of the wall, appeared just a few feet away from them. Boom. With a resounding boom, a part of the city wall collapsed, and 4 figures appeared beside it. Zen and his companions had arrived. Whitehead paled at the sight of these people. He knew something bad was going to happen. The Star Falcons were also shocked at the sight of Zen and his companions. Yan, you all can leave the other shore first, said Zen. Yan's and Natalie's souls of light were still too weak. They would be in danger if they were to remain in the midst of a chaotic battle. Okay, Yan acquiesced. Remember, it's that white ape. It is that white ape that killed Naomi. Natalie said, jabbing a finger towards Whitehead. Before this, both Natalie and Yan hadn't understood why, when the Pear Hill and the White Ape race were on good terms, Whitehead had chosen to betray them. They had their answer now. He had betrayed them just to return to the Sky-Water City. Natalie and Yan soon left the other shore. A howling sounded through the skies. More than 10 star falcons had spread their wings and were headed straight for Zen. These star falcons were the guards of the Sky-Water City. They didn't know why Zen and the others had come here and were treating them merely as ordinary intruders. Zen's eyes narrowed at these star falcons. He stomped his feet and turned into a lightning arc, shooting towards the guards. Crack, 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 the lightning arc continually cut through the group of star falcons. Before anybody could react, charred bodies of the guards began to rain down into the Sky-Water City. With a crack, the lightning flashed in a huge arc in the air and struck the ground at Whitehead's feet, emitting a burst of thunder and causing the members of the White Ape race to clap their hands over their ears that had begun to ring. Zen's figure appeared in the lightning, his eyes cold. You cooperated with the Star Falcon race and kidnapped my sister just to get a foothold in the Sky-Water City. How could you be so reckless? Whitehead was beginning to panic. He was beating a hasty retreat but looked up at the sky from time to time. Are you counting on the Star Falcon race to save you? Zen sneered, I defeated the entire Star Falcon race on my own. Don't you know, Hans and Garth didn't even stand a chance to defeat me. The Star Falcon race asked you to take my sister away because there was no way out for them. Chapter 3151, Abandon the City. Shocked at the words Zen just uttered, Whitehead kept his mouth wide open. Even the leader and elders of the White Ape race were dumbfounded. The White Ape race had left the Sky-Water City too long ago, so naturally, they didn't know much about the current situation in the city. It never crossed their minds that such a thing had happened before. No, it's impossible. Whitehead shook his head in disbelief. Why is it impossible? It's not just the Sky-Water City. Now, even the entire Stage 14 of the other shore belongs to him. He is now the ruler of Stage 14, said Elvinia, who had come down from the city wall as well. However, as she was descending, she carried a small portion of the city wall on her shoulder. When she was finished speaking, she suddenly threw the piece of the city wall out. The piece smashed into a huge statue of a star falcon in the square nearby. This statue had stood there for countless years, yet now it was but a pile of rubble. The ruler of, is he the new stage ruler? So the one in the dark region. The range of activities of purified beings was not limited to the dark region, so the creatures in the light region naturally knew about them. After all, they were the strongest in a certain stage of the other shore. That one has already been killed. Elvinia dusted off her hands nonchalantly. Hanley and Tomas exchanged glances, each filled with disbelief. Finding Zen and Elvinia in the Sky-Water City was the worst news for the Star Falcon race right now. This meant that the Royal Monkey race had failed. However, deep in their hearts, both Hanley and Tomas deduced that the Royal Monkey race hadn't actually failed. Instead, the only logical explanation was the Royal Monkey race had been unable to ask the stage ruler to make a move. This was because if the stage ruler did make a move, there was no possible way these humans could have survived. If this was the case, the Star Falcon race still had hope. But according to Elvinia, they had actually killed and even replaced the stage ruler. Is that human woman telling the truth? Hanley asked, his voice trembling. It can't be true, she must be lying, Tomas said, shaking his head. Even if she's lying, we can't keep our place in the Sky-Water City, Hanley murmured. If it's all true, then the Star Falcon race will be annihilated. We need to inform the others to flee. Hanley spread his wings wide, ready to fly off. Whitehead, on the other hand, was still frozen in shock. Hanley and Tomas leapt into the sky, twittering loudly. Immediately, the rest of the members of the Star Falcon race in the entire Sky-Water City followed suit and launched into the sky to follow the two elders. In a matter of seconds, the Sky-Water City was completely abandoned. Their sudden departure left the remaining races, including the White Ape race, speechless. Today was supposed to be a great day for the White Ape race. However, when they had just marched into the city, the Star Falcon race had even chosen to abandon the city. Oh, the irony. Your White Ape race was on good terms with the Pear Hill, so, supposedly, you could have returned to the Sky-Water City without conflict. Zen paused, and then frowned. Unfortunately, you made a grave mistake. As Zen spoke, he reached out his hand and placed it gently on Whitehead's head. At this point, Whitehead didn't dare resist, he didn't even have the courage to run away. Wordlessly, he stood there, trembling. A deep sense of regret filled his heart. Because the Star Falcon race had fled so quickly, Whitehead figured that Zen was speaking the truth. I shouldn't have taken the trouble to try to please the Star Falcon race, he thought with remorse. However, no medicine in this world could have healed him from this regret. Then a piercing sound came from above, and a lightning bolt arced through the air until it enveloped Whitehead in a sea of blinding light. In the blink of an eye, he had disintegrated into fine, white dust in front of Zen. Seeing Whitehead's powdery remains, the rest of the white ape race were filled with fear, as they anticipated Zen's punishment. They had all gotten into this mess because of Whitehead, but they had still been eager for success. From this point of view, every one of the white ape race had offended Zen. Turning to the white ape race, Zen shouted coldly, "Leave Sky Water City." The leader of the white ape race had been awaiting Zen's order. Upon hearing he was letting them go, he felt joy well up within him. Given the situation, it was already incredibly lucky for them to come out of the city alive. After the white ape race had retreated from the Sky Water City, Yan and Natalie returned to the other shore. Eyeing Whitehead's remains, Natalie shook her head coldly. This guy is lucky to have died this way. He killed Naomi, after all. If it were up to me, I'd have hacked him into pieces. Yan also sighed. May Naomi rest in peace. Since the Star Falcon race had left, there was no need for Zen to stay here. The Sky Water City was now a city with no leader. Even so, Zen couldn't possibly occupy the city by himself. Just as Zen was about to return to the Myriad Spirit City, another 3 creatures of the other shore walked up to him. These 3 creatures represented the 3 large races only second to the Star Falcon race in the Sky Water City. The purpose of these 3 races was very clear. Since Zen had driven away the Star Falcon race, he was now viewed as the owner of the Sky Water City. Of course, Zen couldn't manage such a large city alone, so it was best if he left it up to the 3 races to manage it for him. The actions of the 3 large races mirrored that of the Guide Weasel race and the Giant race back in the Myriad Spirits City, but the difference was that the Guide Weasel race and the Giant race were more sincere. Before Zen even needed to give the order, the 2 races destroyed the Dark Bear race. Obviously, the 3 large races didn't dare take action while the Star Falcon race was still a threat. But now, the Star Falcon race had already fled. You are too late. Zen cast an indifferent glance at them, and then proceeded to walk out of the city with Elvinia and the others. The leaders of the 3 large races looked at each other. They were all quite perceptive, and instantly understood what Zen meant. He had already found a suitable candidate to manage the Sky Water City. No matter who you choose, no one is more suitable than us. We are from the Sky Water City. A leader tried to speak tactfully to Zen, in the hopes of changing his mind. Zen stopped abruptly. Slowly, he turned to face the leader. In a cold voice, he said, "You should consider yourself lucky that the Star Falcon race decided to flee. Otherwise, the Sky Water City would have been a slaughterhouse. You wouldn't have been able to escape." The leader immediately shut up. Narrowing his eyes, Zen turned and proceeded to leave the city. Meanwhile, in the distance, dozens of souls of light had gathered on the rooftops of several buildings in the Sky Water City. These souls of light came from the Sun Crow race, the Bearing race, the Divine Farmer race and the New Moon race. As they watched Zen's receding figure in the distance, their faces fell. Oh my goodness. First the Myriad Spirit City, now the Sky Water City. What's worse, we even can't stay in stage 14 of the other shore. How did things get this far? The fact that the Star Falcon race was expelled meant that they lost the Sky Water City, and that their days of prosperity were coming to an end. There might be no place in stage 14 of the other shore for them to stay. Chapter 3152, Challenge. Before leaving the Myriad Spirit City, Zen had called back Clyde and Raoul. Raoul now waited anxiously, pacing back and forth at the city guard house, carrying a thick metal club. No one dared approach him except for Clyde, the leader of the Guide Weasel race. The full force of Raoul's manic attack was enough to smash any living being. He and his team had been about to take over the Sky Water City when Zen's order came a few days ago. Thinking of this made him restless. It left a bitter taste in his mouth. On the other hand, he really was worried about Zen's and Elvinia's safety. The dark region was much more dangerous than the light region. One couldn't act too rashly lest they risk their chance of survival. At some point in the past few days, Raoul had wanted to take the giants to try to seize the Sky Water City again, but he had been stopped by Clyde. Clyde refused to act without Zen's authorization. He was unconcerned about the remaining forces in the Sky Water City. As Raoul grew more anxious, Zen and Elvinia finally returned to the Myriad Spirit City. As soon as Raoul laid eyes on Zen, he rushed over to him, alight with excitement. Sir, you're back safe and sound. Zen knew that Raoul's excitement was more about what his return implied for the giant race, but the fact that another shore creature was so concerned about his safety still touched him. Inside the city guardhouse hall, the core figures of the guide weasel race and the giant race now gathered. Clyde thought for a long time before posing his burning question to Zen. When will you attack the Sky Water City, sir? The other shore creatures of the Myriad Spirits City apparently didn't know that Zen had already been there. Zen told them this now. What? Clyde was surprised by this. The Star Falcon race already fled the Sky Water City. You can bring your people to take it over. No one will put up any resistance, Zen continued. The Star Falcon race's escape, of course, was futile. They were still on stage 14. After losing their base and suffering a heavy blow from Zen, they would not be able to recover immediately. The only small mercy for them was that Zen had no interest in hunting down their remaining members himself. He left it to the large races of the Sky Water City and the Myriad Spirits City. 3 days later, the giant race and the guide weasel race took control of the Sky Water City. Sure enough, just as Zen had said, no one even tried to stop them from entering the city. In fact, the several large races in the city were scrambling to join them. These large races would have posed some difficulty if they had decided to fight back as a united force. Clyde and Raoul knew very well the only real reason they were able to take over the Sky Water City so smoothly was because of Zen. Hence, Zen had now occupied the only 2 cities of Stage 14. After the takeover of the Sky Water City, he invited the Pear Hill to establish a stronghold in the Myriad Spirits City. The Pear Hill initially refused. They had seen no need for strongholds in any cities over the years. However, Zen persuaded them to change their minds. He didn't want Yan to have to be so far away from him anymore. With these developments, Stage 14 had effectively fallen into the control of the Oneness Sky Palace, or rather Zen. The disciples of the Land of Sword Grief were elated by the news. The disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace could never have imagined having this much influence in Stage 14 just 2 months ago. The disciples on the first floor were now all in respectful awe of Zen. A new month began a few days later. According to the rules of the Land of Sword Grief, during this period, all disciples would automatically obtain a right to challenge other disciples on the same floor to determine their rankings. The top 10 disciples all coveted the number 1 spot held by Zen, and were intent on displacing him from the top rank. They weren't able to do so at the beginning of last month because of Zen's closed-door cultivation. No one on the first floor had dared to disturb him. But since today marked the beginning of another new month, the disciples on the first floor all either paused or finished their cultivation to challenge their opponents. The arena behind the bronze building was now teeming with disciples. Zen also came to the arena, coming out of the room meant for the top rank and making his way to the front of the audience. His arrival attracted many people's attention. Zen has finished his cultivation. Is he going to challenge someone this time? Will he challenge someone on the second floor? That's possible. Zen ignored the hubbub around him and kept his eyes on the ongoing match in the arena. Hayam was facing off with a senior disciple of the Land of Sword Grief, Leighton Zhao, who was ranked 600th. Hayam was a newcomer exercising his right of challenge only for the second time, but he already had the guts to challenge someone holding the 600th spot. The newcomers had actually been all performing well, so far. Elvinia, Dorothy, Milo and some others had made it to the top 1,000 at the beginning of last month, which was an admirable accomplishment. The only reason their stellar performance largely went unrecognized was Zen, of course, outshone them all. Clap, clap, clap. On the arena, Hayam hovered around Leighton, moving like a gale. Without using their other shore tokens, they competed on physical strength and fighting techniques alone. Leighton had an absolute advantage in terms of physical strength, but his bodily movement skill was not as good as Hayam's. Every time he tried to approach Hayam, Hayam would deftly dodge. Leighton became a little impatient with Hayam's evasion. He quickened his pace, meaning to force Hayam into a dead corner. But it seemed Hayam could see through Leighton's plan. With a slight twist of his shoulder, he flashed past Leighton like a nimble fish. Leighton didn't expect this move. He inadvertently left his back exposed. Hayam wouldn't miss such an opening. He stopped midair and turned, gathering all his strength into 3 palm strikes on Leighton. Take this. Hayam's every move was calculated. The reason he dared to make this challenge was that he had merged with a new other shore token in Stage 14. The power given by the other shore token from the Desire World was much stronger than that in the Lust World. This was what made Hayam so confident. The 3 palm strikes were powerful. Each palm strike contained nearly 3,000 divine megatons of force, and they overlapped with each other, magnifying their strength. Layden reached the chaotic source realm a long time ago. With long-term cultivation, the chaotic source spirits in his body had already made great progress. But even he couldn't put up a resistance in time. The powerful palm force on his back slammed into his body. The chaotic source spirits in his body started to lose energy. As the impact surged within him, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Hyam had won the match. He turned to Layden and straightened up, his hands cupped neatly in front of him. I won, Hyam said, with a curt bow. Layden felt dejected. Losing to a newcomer was always humiliating. But he suddenly remembered Cleon, who had also lost to a newcomer. He started to feel a little better. He nodded civilly back to Hyam and left the arena. Layden was defeated. We can't underestimate Hyam. He has only been in the land of sword grief for 1.5 months, but he has already been able to defeat someone of a much higher rank. No matter how powerful he is, though, he is still no match for Zen. When Hyam overheard this, he smiled sheepishly to himself. The new other shore token that he had merged with was a gift from the ear mouse race. And they only gave it to him because of Zen. After all, everyone in the whole Myriad Spirits City was trying to get on Zen's good graces. Admittedly, before entering the chaotic source world, Hyam had once thought he might have a chance against Zen. By now, of course, he had realized how foolish it was to ever think that. Chapter 3153, The Imperial Edict. Hyam came down from the arena and noticed Zen off stage. Smiling, he asked, Zen, have you finished your cultivation as well? Most of the disciples were watching the fight on the arena and only a few had seen Zen here, in front of it. Hyam's words pricked the ears of all the disciples on the first floor, who suddenly turned towards Zen. Zen had turned the city guard house of the Myriad Spirits City into the stronghold of the Oneness Sky Palace. However, lately he'd spent most of his time either traveling away or communicating with the races in the city. Getting an audience with him on the other shore was not easy. However, in the land of sword grief, he was a junior disciple. The difference in status between them was slight, so naturally this made them more comfortable in making requests of him. Hello, Zen, I seem to recall some race gifting you a rare golden turtle. Could I have it please? Zen, when will you distribute the soul crystal again? Zen, I have received 200,000 soul pills. May I keep them for myself? The Oneness Sky Palace was not very rich on the other shore. Even in the Desire World, the soul crystal was rare. Neither finding the soul crystal nor obtaining soul pills was an easy task for the disciples of the land of sword grief, but they still had to share what they got with the stronghold. The stronghold would take care of the disciples and distribute the resources according to their needs. However, several races in the Myriad Spirits City often blackmailed the Oneness Sky Palace before, forcing them to pay a large number of tributes every year. This imposed a heavy burden on the Oneness Sky Palace. But once Zen had arrived, they didn't need to pay the tributes anymore. Instead, the Myriad Spirits City now paid tributes to them, and so did the Skywater City. It seemed as though the resources of the entire Stage 14 rested in Zen's hands. How could the land of sword grief's disciples not be jealous? Zen had already let Hyam and Dorothy distribute the resources once. And all the disciples on the first floor had benefited greatly. But the human being's desire knew no bounds. The Oneness Sky Palace had been quite poor in the past. The disciples had to cultivate on their own because the palace didn't have many resources for them. But Zen was now obscenely rich. The disciples from Stage 15, Stage 16, and Stage 17, as well as those from the higher stages such as Cleon, who was at the top of the first floor, intended to head back to Stage 14. Cleon might have a grudge against Zen, but that mattered little compared to the soul crystal and the other benefits possible. In the blink of an eye, Zen was surrounded by the numerous disciples on the first floor. Well, Hyam had not at all anticipated a reaction like this when he greeted Zen. Zen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He certainly hadn't expected this either. Seeing the crowd only growing larger, all he could do was wave his hand and yell out, "Everyone, please leave these dealings on the other shore." This rule was well understood by all. But getting a meeting with Zen in the Myriad Spirits City was quite difficult. They had to turn to the Guide Weasel race and the Giant race. But Zen was here in person. They would not let this opportunity slip by. Talking about them here is the same as talking about them on the other shore. We are both disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace. There is no need to complicate things. Zen, shut up, a sharp and menacing voice bellowed over the rest. Everyone turned to discover that it came from Dorothy. Zen had carried Dorothy all the way from Stage 13 to Stage 14 that day. The disciples were aware of their relationship and the knowledge of it had spread through the land of sword grief. Moreover, Dorothy was held in high esteem and so no one would dare to respond to her cold rebuke. If you need or want to do something, turn to Hayam. He will record your requests. If your requests are reasonable, Zen will fulfill them. He may have taken over the myriad spirits city but the resources are not limitless. You should know that he doesn't owe you anything, Dorothy continued. After occupying the myriad spirits city, Zen had given the resources he had collected to Hayam for allocation and hadn't imposed any restrictions. Almost all the requests of the disciples were granted. But human beings were all greedy. The disciples on the first floor waited eagerly in the myriad spirits city. Apart from the share left for Zen, the resources that were collected were instantly divided up by them. If things continued this way, it wouldn't be long before all the disciples on the first floor were waiting in the myriad spirits city for Zen to raise them. This was not only disadvantageous for Zen, but for all the disciples of the entire land of Sword Grief. Princess Dorothy is right, Zen has asked me to act on his behalf. If you have any requests, present them to me, Hayam responded with a smile. However, their demands were mostly excessive and unreasonable and Hayam would not agree to them. Plus, Dorothy's words had upset them. Humph, what's the use of turning to you? It's said that the guide weasel race and the giant race turn in as much as 10,000 finger-sized chunks of soul crystal every month, but we get only one finger-sized chunk. Hayam, I have already asked you to help me get another shore token from Clyde. It's not a difficult task, yet you refused me point blank. The disciples who had just been fawning over Zen now flipped their attitudes to blame Hayam. It implied that Zen was under fire too. But they dared not offend Zen and instead targeted Hayam. Zen frowned at their sudden change in attitude. He knew he would obtain a massive amount of resources when he occupied the myriad spirits city. The resources in stage 14 were too many for just him. As a member of the Oneness Sky Palace, he figured he should repay the palace. He was also willing to share some of the resources with the disciples of the land of Sword Grief but he had never expected this reaction. Just then, from the back door of the bronze building, Elvinia walked out. In an icy tone she said, "Do not cut down the tree that gives you shade. You were bullied in the myriad spirits city for ages and said nothing. Now that Zen and I have taken it, you can't seem to ask for enough." Elvinia had also contributed to the prosperity of the Oneness Sky Palace in stage 14. Her words left everyone dead silent. Some were still not satisfied. From the corner, Abdul suddenly spoke out, "According to the law of the land of Sword Grief, the disciples should turn in half of the resources they have got and the remainder should then be distributed among the rest of us. We have followed this law before, so the requests we make." Before he could finish, a golden scroll appeared in Elvinia's hand. She sneered and opened the scroll. "The Imperial Edict of Eastern Emperor Tai says that all the resources Zen and I obtain belong to us. We don't need to share them with the land of Sword Grief. We can distribute them as we like. Read the edict carefully," she growled. Elvinia would show no politeness towards these despicable ingrates. Chapter 3154, Rocco Jung. Upon saying those words, Elvinia threw the scroll she held behind her. Like an arrow being released from its bow, the golden scroll was nailed to the door. Its contents were revealed for all to see. Of course, the imperial edict on the scroll that Eastern Emperor Tai had personally issued was not as straightforward as what Elvinia had said. But they almost had the same meaning. While Zen was busy with his cultivation over the past few days, Elvinia spent that time staying in the Myriad Spirits City. This allowed her to get in contact more frequently and better with the disciples of the land of Sword Grief. As for the problem regarding resource distribution, it was one that she had already expected. Despite Stage 14 being at the bottom of the Desire World, the rules it enforced were not to be ignored. Otherwise, everything would fall into utter chaos. Once Elvinia secretly made her return to the Phoenix Palace, she went straight to Eastern Emperor Tai to request that he issue an imperial edict. The jaws of the disciples on the first floor dropped once they saw the imperial edict. They were hoping for more. Elvinia's move caught them all by surprise. No one could disobey Eastern Emperor Tai's order. The noisy crowd fell silent. If what Elvinia said was true, they wouldn't be able to secure the resources they wanted. According to Eastern Emperor Tai, you're able to distribute the resources as you like. I'm curious as to how you plan to do that, someone asked in a low voice. Elvinia shrugged and then nodded towards Zen. The disciples were met with his indifferent glance. He had already tried his best to satisfy them before. But of course, as was human nature, they always longed for more. As I've said before, Zen sneered, Hayam will be distributing the resources on my behalf. In fact, the imperial edict that Elvinia took out served as a stick, a part of the carrot and stick. Once the reckless disciples received the carrot Zen gave them, they would thank him profusely. If you have any requests, you can approach me. Now, line up, Hayam announced with a smile. Now that the resource distribution problem was settled, no further complications would arise under Hayam's supervision. Soon, a few disciples proceeded to jump onto the arena to compete for their rankings. They all chose to challenge their equals. None of them dared to challenge Zen. There were two reasons for this. First, Zen was known for his high position on the other shore. Second, the image of him defeating Cleon was still vivid in their minds. They all agreed that Zen was anything but weak. Zen took his time and silently observed the arena. More than 10 matches were held before he finally walked up to the arena. Although none of them dared to walk up to meet him, he could always choose an opponent to challenge. The crowd watching had an expectant look on all their faces as they focused on Zen standing in the center of the arena. Zen plans on challenging someone from the second floor this time, right? Once he joined the land of sword grief, he bagged first place. Do you think his second battle will be enough to get him to the second floor? That's impossible, but maybe he'll be different. Zen became famous among the crowd for the skills he showed in the land of sword grief and on the other shore. Just as Zen was about to reveal who he was about to challenge next, those who were on the second floor looked down into the arena below them. 203 people occupied the entire second floor. They were much stronger than those disciples on the first floor. Even the lowest-ranking member of the second floor, Ronnie, was stronger than Cleon. Cleon had challenged Ronnie several times before to try and reach the second floor. Each time, however, he was met with a miserable defeat. A single place was what separated Cleon and Ronnie, but it was a rather large gap between the first floor and second floor. I'm guessing Zen's planning on challenging you, Ronnie, a fair-skinned man hinted with a smile. Next to the man stood Yusuf, who nodded in agreement and added, if he defeats you, he'll make it to the second floor. That'll be his first step. Ronnie, with his dark complexion, stood next to the two. He garnered the last position among those on the second floor. Let's be honest, Ronnie began to say with pride, he doesn't have enough strength to withstand the second floor. Don't get too cocky now, Ronnie. That might not be the case, Yusuf warned with the shake of his head. Don't forget that he's occupied stage 14 due to his exceptional capabilities. Regardless, he's still not strong enough to challenge me, Ronnie retorted. Besides, the fact that he reached the chaotic source realm not too long ago just tells me that he might have relied on some unorthodox skills to get this far. I will surely defeat him if he decides to challenge me. As luck would have it, Zen pointed towards Ronnie from the arena. So he does want to challenge me. A cold expression flashed across Ronnie's face. Despite being on the second floor, he didn't take much pride in being the last place because it constantly concerned him. Now that Zen challenged him, he felt somehow upset. Well then, I guess it's time to show him the true strength of a disciple on the second floor. As Ronnie began to prepare himself for the upcoming battle, Zen said, I want to challenge Rocco Jung of the second floor. It turned out he was not pointing towards Ronnie but the second floor he was on. A wave of silence swept over the arena before a deafening uproar broke it, an ocean wave crashing on the sandy shore. Zen wants to challenge Rocco. Oh my goodness. First he challenged Cleon, the top contender on the first floor. Now he wants to challenge the top contender on the second floor. This guy is nuts. Does that mean he'll challenge Libby, who ranks first in the land of sword grief, next time? He will sooner or later. But he's only been in the land of sword grief for less than 2 months. Who exactly was Rocco? He challenged someone from the third floor 7 years ago. Once he failed, he had no intention of committing the same mistake ever again. All of the disciples on the second floor continued to challenge him, but none was successful in taking him down. While all 202 disciples were on the same level, they knew that he'd always be one level higher, for now, at least. The faces of everyone on the second floor, including the fair-skinned man, Yusuf, and Ronnie, were incomprehensible. With the flick of his wrist, the fair-skinned man unraveled his folding fan before turning to Ronnie. I'm afraid we guessed wrong. He doesn't consider you a worthy opponent. He doesn't consider you as one, either, Ronnie retorted. We're all on the same boat, then, Yusuf voiced out with a chuckle. None of them expected Zen to skip them and go ahead for the all-powerful Rocco. Hayam, Milo, and Dorothy were just as dumbfounded as the others. Was Zen planning to activate the inheritance of world here? If he wasn't, then challenging Rocco would be asking for a death wish. The gap between their levels of power was too wide. Rocco is somewhere else, at the moment. I'll relay your challenge right now, one of the bystanders announced. Many of those on the second floor started to mumble and buzz like bees in a hive, keeping themselves busy to fill in the awkward silence. They hoped that it wouldn't be too difficult for the bystander to find Rocco. Then, the real challenge would begin. Chapter 3155, On the Arena. The rightmost cultivation room of the second floor belonged to Rocco. Everyone knew that disturbing another's cultivation in seclusion was prohibited. However, in the land of sword grief, the right of challenge could be exercised on the first day of each month. And unless the person being challenged was stranded on the other shore, they had no choice but to take up the challenge. Rocco had just returned from the other shore several days ago, where he had found clues about a temple. Based on his findings, he was very likely to discover a temple that had been hidden for a long time. Today, he sorted out all the clues he'd gathered and planned to go out. However, he had to decipher 3 Sanskrit words among the clues before moving forward. Aside from Eastern Emperor Tai, there were a few others who could decipher Sanskrit words in the Oneness Sky Palace. But he knew that if he sought out help from these people, he would have to shell out too much. Plus, it might take a while for them to decipher the words, but he did not have any time to waste. Even so, Rocco didn't have many choices. He considered even consulting the people by Clear Lake who could also decipher Sanskrit words, but he learned that they worked even slower than those in the Oneness Sky Palace to begin with. Tap tap. Just then, someone knocked on the door. The sound of the knock brought him an overwhelming sensation of annoyance. It reminded him that today was the first day of the month, meaning that it was the challenge day in the land of sword grief. All the disciples on the second floor wanted Rocco to be pulled down from his position. Over the years, he had been challenged many times, but people had always failed to knock him down. Around 4 months ago, Rocco grew tired of the endless challenges that he injured one challenger badly. As a result, the other disciples grew afraid and stopped challenging him. After that fight, Rocco had lived a peaceful life. Having grown used to the silence, he did not expect to be challenged so soon. Maybe I did not injure the last guy enough, he thought. Rocco opened the door to see a man standing before him. The man was ranked 168th on the second floor. You dare to challenge me? Rocco questioned the man, his face stiff and cold. The man smiled awkwardly and said, I wouldn't dare. Only a handful of people on the second floor dare challenge Rocco, and obviously, this man was not one of them. Then who is it? Rocco asked again. The challenger's name is Zen Luo, the man replied in a flustered manner. He's already standing in the arena. Zen Luo, his name does not ring a bell. Rocco shook his head, surprised to hear Zen's name. He had been isolated in his secluded cultivation room for so long that he had no clue about the recent happenings in the land of sword grief. The name was not familiar at all. Rocco doubted if Zen was on the second floor. The confusion across Rocco's face sent the other man laughing. That guy is the number 1 disciple on the first floor, he chuckled. He hasn't even stepped foot onto the second floor yet. Hearing that the number 1 disciple on the first floor had challenged him confused him. Rocco was the number 1 disciple of the second floor, and Zen had no idea what was coming to him. Rocco's face grew stiff again, with a hint of a smirk. The second floor's top 10 disciples had to think twice before challenging Rocco, so who did this Zen guy think he was? Did he want to get injured? Did he want to die? As he walked out of the cultivation room with the man beside him, he couldn't help but ask, does this guy know what he signed up for? He then caught a glimpse of the arena from a window on the second floor. In the arena, a man stood with his hands behind him. He looked intently at the second floor with bright eyes and a confident stature. This was Zen, waiting patiently for his opponent to arrive. When people saw Rocco beside the window, an uproar in the arena suddenly burst. Rocco has come out, it seems he'll accept the challenge. I'd like to see if Zen will create one more miracle this time. The crowd was jeering, with people hoping for Zen to win, despite their belief that he could never beat Rocco. Zen had made a miracle before, but asking for another one seemed nearly impossible at this point. The disciples on the second floor, including Yusuf and Ronnie, also fixed their eyes on Rocco. All they could think of was how Rocco would react to this challenger. Everyone knew that Rocco was in no mood for a challenge. However, because Zen was the number 1 disciple on the first floor, he had the right to challenge Rocco, while Rocco had no right to refuse. I heard that you want to challenge me. Rocco shouted towards the arena, how dare you? He stared at Zen coldly, as if his gaze alone would make him retreat. It was like a giant looking down at an ant. It was obvious that Rocco had no idea who Zen was, nor the battles he had won before. If he did, he probably would have watched his tongue. All he knew was that Zen was a new, prominent disciple on the first floor who had grown so proud. So proud that he wanted to challenge the number one disciple on the second floor. Zen cocked his head towards Rocco's direction and stared back. This is my right, one that every disciple in the land of sword grief is granted. He spoke with a sudden calmness. Is that so? Rocco stepped out of the window. Every time he took a step forward, fist-sized blocks hovered beneath his feet, catching them. They formed stairs for him to walk safely to the arena. This was a theurgy of the truth of void destruction. Eventually, he made it down safely from the second floor and onto the arena. I don't have time to play games with you, he said. I know you have the right to challenge me, but you should just give up now while you have the chance. There are many others who are on your level. Rocco pointed to the second floor. At this point, disciples on the second floor left their cultivation rooms and stood by the windows to get a glimpse of the fun. After spending so much time alone, Rocco was surprisingly patient. If this were happening 4 months ago, he wouldn't have even warned Zen. But now that he had given Zen an opportunity to surrender, Rocco thought that Zen would have done it by now. To his surprise, Zen was unmoved by the gesture. I'm not interested in you, Zen spat back. The reason why I wanted to challenge you is because you hold first place on the second floor. I can't challenge the third floor unless I defeat you first. So, naturally, I have to get rid of you first. Zen spoke so confidently that it surprised people who didn't know him. However, those who did know him were not surprised at all. This was the typical Zen. After all, Zen's performance had already surpassed Libby's. It was only a matter of time before he stepped onto the third floor. But still, those who had no idea who Zen was couldn't help but gasp. What happened while I was cultivating in seclusion? A random disciple whispered. Where does this arrogant guy come from? Chapter 3156, Confusion. To the second floor disciples who didn't know Zen, it looked as if Rocco had tolerated Zen and was even considerate enough to not put him in an awkward situation. Zen's insistence in challenging him only showed his ungrateful and reckless nature. Yusuf shook his head and smiled. He came out of nowhere. He's a new disciple and has only been in the land of sword grief for less than 2 months. Maybe 2 months weren't enough for him to know the land of sword grief's situation. The disciple's words faltered when he realized something. Wait. This guy was ranked first on the first floor but he had only been here for 2 months. Did that mean it only took him 2 months to nab the top spot? 2 months. Are you serious, Yusuf? He asked. The disbelief was clearly obvious on his face. Those on the second floor all had been on the first floor too. Becoming the number one fighter on the first floor was incredibly difficult, but Zen was able to do it in 2 months. That was impossible. None of the disciples on the second floor could believe this. Not in 2 months, Yusuf clarified. The disciples relaxed hearing this. They thought perhaps there was a misunderstanding, so they waited for Yusuf's explanation. However, what he said next shocked them even more. On his first day entering the land of sword grief, he defeated Cleon and became number 1. Not 2 months, but only a day. Yusuf squinted at the scene below. It doesn't really matter though. The fact remains that he wants to challenge Rocco after less than 2 months. A genius at Zen's level was rare, even in the Oneness Sky Palace. He was very confident too since he dared to challenge Rocco in just a short amount of time. Where exactly did his confidence come from? Even Rocco himself was confused at Zen's brashness. Did he have some sort of secret technique? A magical ace up his sleeves? Rocco! Another disciple shouted from above. Don't underestimate this guy. He ranked first on the first floor on his first day of entering the land of sword grief. This piece of information greatly cleared up all the speculation in Rocco's head. Now he understood why Zen was so confident. Ranking first on your first day. Outstanding, he couldn't help but remark in amazement. There has never been such an amazing person that appeared in the Oneness Sky Palace before. Not even Libby was able to do it. That's a really outstanding feat, but I still think it's too early for you to challenge me. Rocco waved his hands and the other shore power surged throughout his whole body. A strange aura emanated from him, plunging the arena into a state of intense pressure. The flash of murderous intent in his eyes did not go unnoticed by Zen. Rocco had been ranked first on the second floor for quite a long time now. He even challenged the disciples on the third floor before, but he always failed. In the earlier days, someone even had defeated him and got promoted to the third floor. Rocco knew that a talent like Zen was also destined to reach third floor one day. The thought made him burn with jealousy. Just now, he only planned to teach Zen a lesson, but that slight twinge of resentment made him want to kill the brat. Those watching could only stare in wide-eyed wonder at the sudden power that surged out of Rocco's body. They all knew Rocco was number one on the second floor, but none of them ever expected his power to actually be this great. His power was condensed in an almost solid state of pressure, as if he could crush a person with one move. It's a pity I can't use the ability of the other shore token on the arena, otherwise I could increase my strength threefold. Rocco murmured to himself. When Zen felt Rocco's power, he became just a bit more serious about this challenge he was proposing. His opponent had just extracted more than 5,000 divine megatons of power on a whim. Who knew what his limit was? Not only that, Rocco's other shore token could even increase his strength threefold. It was fortunate that he couldn't use it in the arena. As soon as Rocco finished talking, he jumped and immediately pounced. He was determined to make the first move and didn't give Zen any sort of warning whatsoever. He raised his hand and allowed the other shore power to rush towards his right hand, forming a powerful spiral. Swish! This powerful fist was headed straight towards Zen. There was no need to be stupid and try to take on Rocco's punch. Zen immediately sidestepped and dodged. Boom! Instead of Zen, Rocco's fist hit the ground and made the entire arena shake violently. The array flickered momentarily, having taken the brunt of his attack. You shouldn't dodge like a coward, Rocco exclaimed. Since you were the one to propose the challenge, you should face me like a man. Disciples mainly competed in terms of chaotic source spirits and other shore power here in the arena of the Land of Sword Grief. There wasn't really any other skill to prove beside those two. Hearing this, Zen decided not to dodge Rocco's second punch. Instead, he reached out and tried to block his fist. Rocco snickered at Zen's chosen move. Idiot. He didn't think Zen would take his words so seriously. Rocco only said that to rile him up, but it seemed to have worked since the young man was now determined to face him head-on. How could such a stupid person become number one so easily? There was no way Zen was going to survive his explosive power now. Maybe those guys on the second floor lied to him. It didn't really matter though. Zen was going to lose this fight after this punch. Would he die? That depended on his luck. Rocco didn't really have the time to dally with these first floor fighters since he had to deal with the Sanskrit words. His only choice was to go all out and finish the fight as fast as possible without any heed for the consequences. Bang! Just as he expected, Zen had been unable to block his punch with his hands. As a result, Rocco's fist directly collided with his chest. Whoosh! The force was enough to send Zen all the way to the edge of the arena. He would have fallen, had he not stopped himself at the last moment. Any other ordinary warrior would have been pleased by this result. However, there was nothing but a serious frown on Rocco's face because he expected more. That punch should have pierced through Zen's chest and made his internal organs collapse. However, Rocco had failed to tire out Zen's chaotic source spirits. Did that mean Zen had already cultivated the chaotic source spirits to the middle stage? Once the disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace reached the chaotic source realm, they would immediately get recruited in the Land of Sword Grief. Did Zen also just reach the chaotic source realm? Rocco looked at Zen in confusion. How long have you been in the chaotic source realm? He asked. Chapter 3157, Overwhelming Force. Generally speaking, the three floors of the Land of Sword Grief represented the three stages of the chaotic source realm. At that moment, Rocco did not use his full strength, but the power he had just unleashed was impossible for someone who had just entered the chaotic source realm to resist. They said that Zen had just entered the Land of Sword Grief less than 2 months ago, so he also entered the chaotic source realm not long ago. It should be impossible. His chaotic source spirits weren't exhausted yet after they took his punch. It was true that Zen was at the middle stage of the chaotic source realm, but how did he reach this stage in just 2 months? There was only one possibility. Many years ago, Zen had already stepped into the chaotic source realm, but the Land of Sword Grief had just recently received him. Meanwhile, Rocco joined the Land of Sword Grief long after he had entered the chaotic source realm. Although his case was rare, it still existed. How long? Zen didn't expect for Rocco to ask about such a thing. He lowered his head and thought for a while, then he said, about 3 months. Upon hearing his words, Rocco's face darkened. Do you think I'm a fool? It's impossible for you to get to the middle stage of the chaotic source realm in around 3 months. He bellowed. He refused to believe Zen's words at all. The new disciples around the arena began to speak and assure him that Zen was correct. Just only 3 months. Zen is one of us. How could it be wrong as we all entered the chaotic source world together? Yes, exactly speaking, it's 3 months and 9 days. At the sight of those disciples, affirmative looks, Rocco was completely confused. Just then, Yusuf, who was on the second floor, said loudly, Rocco, Zen is a disciple of our Flow Sword sect. He is indeed one of those disciples who have just entered the chaotic source realm. Since Rocco knew Yusuf, he knew that the man wouldn't lie to him. After Yusuf's confirmation, Rocco was even more confused. He stared curiously at Zen and asked, "Then how did you do it?" He wasn't the only one who was dumbfounded. Some people with insight even guessed that Zen had made rapid progress ever since he had obtained the chaotic source spirits. There must be some secrets he was hiding. Then again, there was actually a limit to the rapid progress that everyone believed. They had thought he might be only 2 times faster than the others. But now, Rocco believed that Zen had stepped into the middle stage of the chaotic source realm. That was not the kind of rapid progress they had thought. To put it simply, that was super rapid progress. Zen looked nonchalantly at Rocco and said, "You have also stepped into the chaotic source realm. Why did you ask such a naive question?" In order to become stronger, warriors naturally tried every means possible to improve. Moreover, it wasn't unusual that everyone had their own secrets. Why would they expose their secrets to other people anyway? As for the secret of the true enlightenment, Zen could expose it to the Oneness Sky Palace to make contributions to the orthodox swordsmanship. But, how could he tell the others the secrets of his body and the truth of godly way? Naive, Rocco hissed. "Since you don't want to tell me, then I guess I'll have to investigate it myself." When he was done speaking, he took a step forward. A strange ripple appeared inside the whole arena. The ripple seemed to have come from a feather-light step, but it actually contained a great amount of power. Suddenly, Rocco had disappeared in front of Zen. Even the disciples on the first floor below the arena couldn't see Rocco. Only a few people on the second floor had thought of looking up, and saw Rocco's figure flying above. On the other hand, Zen hesitated just for a second when he saw Rocco disappear. Then ripples appeared in the arena again. He was now in the center of the ripples. "He's up there." Zen instinctively looked up, but he quickly frowned. "It's too late," said Yusuf as he shook his head. "That guy can't avoid this step." The fair-skinned man echoed Yusuf's sentiments. "Rocco is very serious this time. His step may contain 7,000 divine megatons of the other shore power. I'm afraid that Zen might end up disabled." Ronnie agreed. No matter how talented Zen was, his skills were still too far from Rocco's. If he could constantly dodge and consume Rocco's strength, then he might have a slight chance of winning. However, it was almost impossible to do such a thing. As soon as Zen realized that, he had no room to dodge. Of course, the consequences of withstanding such attacks weren't hard to imagine. However, some of the disciples on the first floor who watched the fight felt differently about it. Some of them looked pleased to see Zen in misfortune. But Elvinia and her companions were genuinely worried and actually cared about Zen. It was known that Rocco was the #1 warrior on the second floor. Thus, it was too difficult for Zen to challenge him. Despite that, Zen did not have the slightest intention of dodging this time. He slightly tilted his body, then the civilization artifact released majestic other shore power. He knew that even if the regal jade civilization was restrained in stage 13, its civilization artifact could still unleash 8,000 divine megatons of force. Back when he had been previously limited by his physical body, he could only use such a powerful force while activating the inheritance of world. Now as he had stepped into the middle stage of the chaotic source realm, his chaotic source spirits were able to bear 4,000 to 5,000 divine megatons of force. Furthermore, the truth of godly way in his body could greatly increase the chaotic source spirit's ability to contain force. Splash! The civilization artifact finally unleashed the other shore power contained inside it. Almost all of the chaotic source spirits in Zen's body were maxed out to the limit, while the light dots of the chaotic source spirits swelled up one by one and bulged on his skin. The chaotic source spirits were almost on the edge of exhaustion, but at the same time, he infused them with the truth of godly way to maintain their original state. 8,000 divine megatons of force. At that point, he directed his punch straight to Rocco's foot sole. Yet, Rocco didn't take Zen's attack seriously. The truth was, he wanted to cripple Zen, then find the secret of rapid progress from him. If he could really know this secret, he would have a chance to get a place on the third floor and perhaps even defeat Libby, an unrivaled talent and the strongest warrior on that floor. The moment he stepped down, however, he felt a strong force come from his right foot. He could tell that the force was stronger than his own. "How is that possible?" Rocco exclaimed in utter shock. Click, click, click. The chaotic source spirits that glimmered in Rocco's body were immediately extinguished. In the blink of an eye, the force had rapidly spread from his right leg to his whole body. Crack, crack, crack. In the next second, the power that hadn't been offset by his chaotic source spirits started to invade his whole being. Specifically, the force that went up along his right leg traveled to his right arm and the right side of his body, then broke them with a crisp sound. Almost without any resistance, he miserably fell out of the arena with a soft thud. Nothing but silence filled the whole land. Chapter 3158, The Second Imperial Edict. Everyone present couldn't say anything, and they were all stunned in silence. The disciples on the second floor just stared blankly at Zen on the arena. At first, they simply wanted to have fun and let Rocco, the number one warrior on the second floor, teach him a lesson. Therefore, someone took the initiative to call Rocco over. Even though Zen was extraordinarily talented, he had just reached the chaotic source realm. It was already a great miracle that he had defeated Cleon, and they believed he couldn't possibly fight Rocco back. However, he still fought head-on. He didn't rely on his strong body alone, but instead, he used both his body and strength to defeat Rocco in a face-to-face combat. After he had won that round, he jumped from being the number one on the first floor to the number one on the second floor, and subsequently passed all the disciples on the second floor. The deathly silence lasted for a long time. Finally, Yusuf, who was on the second floor, opened his mouth and said, "This is too crazy. He has directly become the number one on the second floor." "My goodness," Ronnie exclaimed with eyes as wide as saucers. "I've been on the second floor for several hundred years, but I haven't even made it to the top 100. Another disciple commented. "What's more is that he is only in the 14th stage of the other shore realm," the fair-skinned man muttered. Overall, the competition on the second floor was much fiercer than it was on the first floor. There were only 203 people competing, but it was extremely difficult to advance even just one place. Many people on the second floor had stayed there for countless years, and their names had remained in the same places on the ranking stone. It was certainly not an easy thing for them to improve their rankings. Hyam, who was watching under the arena, was also taken aback. As a newcomer like Zen, he naturally paid attention to Zen's strength. Zen had unleashed more than 8,000 divine megatons of force in the chaotic source world, but the terrifying amount of power was way beyond what he could endure. If one wanted to use 7 or 8,000 divine megatons of force without the help of the inheritance of world, they would have to practice in the chaotic source realm for many years. However, Zen had done such a thing so easily. His growth speed was simply too fast. If he continued at that rate, he would probably leave the land of sword grief soon. Meanwhile, Rocco lay on the ground in pain. He stretched out his left hand to grab his right arm and gently twisted it. The broken bone in his arm quickly returned to its original position. After that, he continued to press on his chest, all the way to his right leg, until the bones on the right side of his body were corrected. After that, another shore token appeared above his head. The other shore token spun around and a green light covered his head, which then instantly healed all the wounds on the right side of his body. Then he got up from the ground, took a look at Zen, and left. It was known that Rocco was an aloof and arrogant man. Thus, it was like a big joke to him to lose to the number one warrior on the first floor. Like the others, he was also quite confused, but it was obvious that Zen wouldn't ease his doubts. Therefore, he didn't want to stay any longer. Once he was gone, the disciples on the first floor released their uncontrollable excitement. Zen won so easily, oh my goodness, especially when I know Rocco is simply an invincible existence. There are very few people who can make it to the third floor these years. Rocco should be the most promising one. I didn't expect that Zen would replace him. The disciples on the first floor let out a sigh of relief. Since Zen had been above all of them from the very first day, quite a number of disciples naturally felt ashamed. However, they felt a bit better when he had surpassed even the disciples on the second floor. Now, the powerful warriors on the third floor might be able to defeat him. His name on the ranking stone on the first floor quietly disappeared, and at the same time, everyone's rankings went up by one place. Even Cleon, who Zen had previously defeated, was no exception. Truth be told, Cleon had mixed feelings about returning to the first place on the first floor in such a way. Still, he now understood that he truly couldn't fight against Zen. In just 2 months, their skills already differed greatly from each other. Cleon calmed down a little at this thought. On the other hand, the ranking stone on the second floor showed that more than 200 people had all dropped by one place, and Zen was ranked first. Therefore, Rocco had to give up his cultivation room on the second floor to Zen. While all of those happened, the battle on the arena continued. In order to compete for the rankings at the beginning of each month, the battle would last for a few days. It also went without saying that the rankings on the ranking stone would change as well. As soon as Zen came down from the arena, Dorothy immediately went up to him. Congratulations, Zen. You've made it to the second floor so fast. She said excitedly. Are you going to challenge Libby and take the top ranking of the Land of Sword Grief next month? Hayam asked with a laugh. Take the top ranking of the Land of Sword Grief. Zen thought about it for a while, shook his head and smiled. I can't do that in a month. You must be kidding, he chided. Generally speaking, the disciples on the third floor were almost on par with the likes of Athamar. If they left the Land of Sword Grief, they would have the chance to become oneness governors. Still, it would be difficult for Zen to fight them straight, even if he activated the Inheritance of World. It was simply too hard for him to do all of those in only a span of a month. Well, I'll give you 2 months. Dorothy pursed her lips and smiled. Can you give me more time? Zen asked bitterly. No, Dorothy shook her head, pretending to be serious. Just then, Elvinia appeared beside Zen. She glanced coldly at Dorothy and said, I just announced 1 imperial edict. In fact, my father has issued 2 imperial edicts. What's the second imperial edict about? Zen asked in surprise. My father wants to see you. Now follow me to the Phoenix Palace, she told him. Eastern Emperor Tai wants to see me. Zen thought, surprised. His mind subconsciously thought about the truth enlightenment. Fortunately, his son had deciphered the truth enlightenment, but he hadn't completely comprehended it. If Eastern Emperor Tai urged him, he would only offer 500 words at most. Why does Eastern Emperor Tai want to see me? In reality, he actually wanted to hesitate. You'll know when you meet him. Elvinia grabbed Zen's arm and pulled him away, leaving Dorothy stunned as she watched the two of them leave. As for Hayam, he was in deep thought. Is Eastern Emperor Tai going to grant Zen a marriage? He asked out of the blue. What? Obviously, Dorothy was shocked. When Hayam saw how Dorothy looked, he immediately realized that he had said something wrong. It's not necessarily true. It's probably because of what happened within stage 14, he said hastily. Although Hayam tried to explain, Dorothy was already at a loss. Elvinia had already fallen in love with Zen, and Zen had made a name for himself. Eastern Emperor Tai might really grant him a marriage. Dorothy was too reserved when it came to relationships. Now, she felt a greater sense of anxiety. Her lips curved into a deep frown and she swam in her thoughts for a long time. After a while, it seemed that she had finally made a difficult decision. She left the Land of Sword Grief alone and headed straight for the Origin Mountain. Chapter 3159, Writing It Down. In the very center of the Phoenix Palace was the magnificent Supreme Dragon Hall. If there was an important guest, or any important event to be held, this was where Eastern Emperor Tai would be. In front of the hall, 2 rows of warriors clad in golden armor stood straight, looking steadily forward, and exuding some kind of solemnity. Standing before the hall, Zen felt the solemn aura and put a grave expression on his face. The last time he met Eastern Emperor Tai was in his resting place, that couldn't be regarded as an official meeting. But to think that he was summoned to such a great hall, what were they planning? Elvinia had also kept everything to herself. Suddenly, a loud voice resounded from within. Princess of Spirit Peace, Zen Luo, enter the hall. Princess of Spirit Peace. Zen blinked in confusion. It's my title, Elvinia merely said. Let's go inside. With a nod, Zen entered the hall alongside Elvinia. Over 20 people were standing on either side. The golden armored warriors outside were merely oneness guards, but the people inside were different, almost every one of them emitted an outstandingly strong aura. Zen even spotted Athamar and Goran standing among them. These people, Zen observed his periphery and was rather shocked at what he found. The people were arranged from front to back according to their strength levels. As oneness governors, both Athamar and Goran could only be ranked at about the 10th place. The 2 in the back emitted a deep, unpredictable aura, not much weaker than that of Eastern Emperor Tai. These were probably the pillars of the Oneness Mountain or even the Oneness Sky Palace. Quietly, Zen observed them from the corner of his eyes. They were staring at Zen with a burning gaze. All of them had heard of Zen, but apart from Athamar and some others, it was the first time they had met him in person. Legends of Zen on the other shore piqued their curiosity. After walking along the hall, Zen bowed before Eastern Emperor Tai. The latter smiled and asked, Zen, you've been in the Land of Sword Grief for almost 2 months. You must have made rapid progress. I heard that you are ranked first on the first floor now. Hearing the Emperor's words had all the strong warriors on both sides of the hall widen their eyes in shock. Only 2 months after entering the Land of Sword Grief, Zen was already ranked first on the first floor. Such rapid improvement was unheard of. Zen was clearly no ordinary talent. Father, Zen has ranked first on the first day he entered the land of sword grief. Today, he has already defeated Rocco and now ranks first on the second floor, Elvinia said indifferently, as though the news wasn't insanely shocking. The news of Zen defeating Rocco hadn't yet spread within the Oneness Sky Palace. Surely, Eastern Emperor Tai and his high-ranking officials hadn't heard of it. You defeated Rocco? An old man next to Athamar looked at Zen in disbelief. The latter merely nodded. Smiling, Athamar said, I heard your nephew was trying to break through to the third floor but Zen defeated him. How unexpected. The old man smiled bitterly and shook his head. My nephew is arrogant, but he was defeated by someone who entered the chaotic source realm just a little over 3 months ago. I'm afraid it will be difficult for him to accept the fact. The fact that Zen ranked first on the first floor within 2 months was already highly shocking to these high-ranking officials. But to think that Zen had become first on the second floor as well, his progress was amazing. It was simply unheard of in the land of sword grief. Even if Zen had obtained another powerful other shore token, he still had to follow the rules of the land of sword grief. In the land of sword grief, people were forbidden to use the abilities of other shore tokens. Instead, they could only use the other shore power to fight against each other. Because the land of sword grief merely tested their other shore power and chaotic source spirits, no special tricks were allowed on the battleground. Eastern Emperor Tai was stunned upon hearing Elvinia's words. Zen, are you really ranked first on the second floor? He asked Zen. It's absolutely true. If you don't believe it, you can go check the ranking stone yourself, Elvinia continued. She wasn't surprised that he was still in disbelief, not having seen the rankings with his own eyes. But Elvinia's look was so serious that no one present believed she could be lying. Eastern Emperor Tai nodded and said, I do believe it. But it's just too incredible. Gracefully, he shifted the subject. Zen, you've been in the land of sword grief for some time. Have you deciphered more of the truth enlightenment? At the mention of the truth enlightenment, all the high-ranking officials had their ears perk up. The truth enlightenment that Zen had handed over was first passed down among the hands of these people. While there were only 200 words, they had benefited a great deal, drastically increasing their strength. If they could cultivate the complete truth enlightenment, they'd definitely undergo qualitative changes. As expected, Zen murmured inwardly. That confirmed that Eastern Emperor Tai was indeed targeting the truth enlightenment. Since he had planned to expose the truth enlightenment to the public, it wasn't really difficult for him to tell them about it. But Zen still felt that something was wrong. If Eastern Emperor Tai only wanted the truth enlightenment, there was no need for him to summon so many of them. Yes, Zen said, ignoring his lingering confusion. I've deciphered the truth enlightenment to 500 words. Shall I hand it to you later or write it down here? The high-ranking officials there could obtain the truth enlightenment no matter how Zen offered it. The difference lay in whether it was handed over to them by Zen or by Eastern Emperor Tai himself. Eastern Emperor Tai invitingly gestured at Zen and said, these old officials are all old friends of mine. There's no need to hide anything from them, Zen. You can write it down here and they can observe as they like. Okay. Nodding in agreement, Zen gently pressed the space ring on his finger. A single sheet of paper appeared in the air, along with a brush, which he promptly grabbed. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. For warriors and soldiers, they build their bodies with clarity of mind and comprehension of the heart. Zen's words vigorously appeared on the sheet of paper. Meanwhile, the high-ranking officials stared hard at the sheet, afraid of missing a single detail. But after a while of staring, they all felt dizziness come over them. A middle-aged man of lower strength even fainted. That had Zen pause for a moment. Masters, comprehending this truth enlightenment cannot be accomplished overnight. If you cultivate it forcefully, I'm afraid it will hurt your souls. Cultivating the truth enlightenment was much more difficult than cultivating the truth of eternal sword intent. Even for both Zen and Eastern Emperor Tai, it was difficult to speed up their cultivation. In fact, it was also difficult for them to read it. The high-ranking officials were all well aware of this, even more so than Zen, but they didn't want to waste a single moment of this opportunity. As they tried to comprehend it rapidly, their souls of light naturally took some damage. Fortunately, all the high-ranking officials were powerful people. After a few seconds, the man who had just fainted woke right back up. He got up from the ground on his own, bowed before Eastern Emperor Tai, and retreated to the side. Chapter 3160, A Gracious Reward. It wasn't long before 500 words were already put on the paper. Zen gently placed the brush down and stored it in his space ring. He turned to Eastern Emperor Tai. I have written down all that I have deciphered, Your Majesty. Eastern Emperor Tai beamed happily as he gazed at the output. He still hadn't figured out how Zen could decipher Sanskrit words. He thought it was blind guessing, at first. However, Eastern Emperor Tai himself was proficient in deciphering Sanskrit words, and he knew one couldn't get this far just by guessing. He had no doubt that with Zen's help, they would soon decipher the full text of the Truth Enlightenment. Eastern Emperor Tai was thrilled at the thought. If we can decipher the Truth Enlightenment completely, it will be a great boon to the Oneness Sky Palace, Eastern Emperor Tai said, a bright smile on his face. The Oneness governors and other high-ranking officials nodded their heads in agreement, proud and excited of this development. None more so than Athamar. He thought of how fortunate they were that Zen had joined the Swordlight Palace. Athamar had never imagined he would make such great contributions to the Oneness Sky Palace. Given Zen's talent, he would probably prove even more valuable in the future. Athamar looked forward to seeing him accomplish more as time went by. It is my honor, Your Majesty, Zen responded, modestly. Eastern Emperor Tai turned his smile on Zen. But there is another reason why I called you here today. At these words, Elvenia, who had been standing beside Zen, stared at the ground and began to blush shyly, a rare sight to see. How else may I help you, Your Majesty? Zen asked, confused. He had noticed that this occasion seemed unusually grand, but the thought had left his mind as he concentrated on his earlier task. At this moment, a pleasant voice rang out, do you remember that I promised I would reward you graciously? Flamen walked out from the back of the palace. She was dressed in fiery red silk, with fire phoenixes hanging at her cuffs and waist. She looked utterly regal and glamorous. Reward me graciously. Zen had to rack his brains before realizing what Flamen was talking about. He had forgotten all about it until she mentioned it again just now. Back then, Zen and Elvenia were trapped in the dark region, facing mortal danger. Only after they were stuck in the light column were they able to leave the other shore and come back to the source world. Even so, they were still in danger then. Flamen had asked Zen then to protect her daughter, promising to reward him for her safe return. In fact, Zen hadn't paid much attention to those words. By the time they left the dark region, Elvenia had already become a purified being, while Zen had obtained the civilization artifact, which was all the reward he wanted. There was also the matter of Elvenia coming back with her memory flame in disarray, her intelligence temporarily degenerating to that of a child's. Flamen had been very upset about that and forgot the reward thing. That she would now bring up it, however, came as a surprise. I do remember you saying something of the sort, Lady Flamen, but what reward will you give me? Zen asked, carefully. Flamen chuckled and looked at Elvenia. The gracious reward is right by your side, she pronounced. Zen turned his startled eyes on Elvenia. Seeing her blush and fidget made him realize what was happening. Lady Flamen, do you mean? I want Elvenia to marry you, Flamen declared flatly. Hearing this, Zen's heart dropped. This was starting to look like a complicated mess. Would you take my daughter's hand in marriage? Eastern Emperor Tai asked seriously. The high-ranking officials flanking both sides of the hall turned to look at Zen expectantly. They thought it would be a perfect match. Although Zen was cultivating in the Oneness Sky Palace, he still joined them as an outsider. Since he had the bloodline of the Nine Li race, if he married Elvenia, he would truly be part of the Oneness Sky Palace. Zen straightened up, cupping one hand over the other in front of him respectfully. Your Majesty, Lady Flamen, I already have a principal wife. Elvenia was the daughter of Eastern Emperor Tai. She couldn't compromise her status by being a concubine of Zen, could she? But Zen had been together with Letitia for so long. Surely, he would never forgive himself if he suddenly gave her up for another. Of course I know that, Flamen responded gracefully. But once Elvenia marries you, she will have that status. She is, after all, my beloved daughter with Eastern Emperor Tai, and can settle for nothing less. Even your principal wife understands this, and has given her consent. Zen's eyebrows shot up at these words. Tia has agreed to this, Lady Flamen. She said this personally. Zen had been so busy on the other shore of late that he had had no time to visit Letitia and the others at the Flow Sword sect. He remembered, however, Elvenia telling him that Letitia would be taken to the Phoenix Palace. Zen thought it was unusual, at the time, but he didn't worry too much about it. He knew Letitia would be safe in the Phoenix Palace, at least. It dawned on Zen now why Letitia and Margaret had been brought here. Of course, it came directly from her, Flamen said, nodding emphatically. Zen glanced at Elvenia before speaking again. May I see Tia, then? Zen indeed had plans to visit Letitia and the others now that he had also been summoned here to the Phoenix Palace. But the developments of this visit so far had been completely unexpected. Flamen blinked slightly before regaining her composure. They are cultivating in seclusion in the Heavenly Cultivation Palace. They have activated the Soul Fire Swirl. I'm afraid it's not appropriate to interrupt them at this moment. The Soul Fire Swirl was a kind of cultivation method in the Heavenly Cultivation Palace. Flamen wouldn't lie to Zen, would she? On the other hand, Zen thought, she could very easily manipulate others into thinking what she wanted. Elvenia almost looked pitiful by Zen's side, her wide eyes gazing at him hopefully. She desperately wished he wouldn't let her down now. Today, her father had summoned all the high-ranking officials to the palace, supposedly for the deciphering of the truth enlightenment. However, his real purpose was to seal the marriage, in front of witnesses. You are overthinking this, Zen. This is a wonderful thing, Athamar told him, gently. That's right, you seem to love each other. What else is there to consider? Another high-ranking official chimed in. Zen barely glanced at them before responding to Flamen, my apologies. I just cannot decide without consulting Letitia myself. Please excuse my leave. He turned around and walked out. The high-ranking officials in the Phoenix Palace grew a buzz, turning to each other in astonishment and confusion. The old man beside Eastern Emperor Tai, in particular, was seething. He had gone to countless life and death battles with Eastern Emperor Tai. The two of them were like brothers. It angered him to see Zen daring to humiliate Eastern Emperor Tai like this. Stop, you brat, the old man roared furiously. A terrifying aura rushed from inside the hall, seemingly chasing after Zen. The guards in golden armor posted outside the hall trembled. Zen continued to stride out purposefully even as this threat hounded him.